for me, it was kind of like when I started reading the aspect of your memories, like getting, you know, reawakened essentially. I feel like my mom, like she was like, you should read this book, you might relate. And I was like, yeah, I do. So yeah. I think I'm still at that phase where Yahweh has been slowly reminding me of things that have happened in the past, but he's not like detailed anything yet. So, you know.
Well, I even as I was going through reading the book A New Creation, this one
Mhm.
by Lisa George, right? That's your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, did you help to write this at all?
Nope.
No.
Not at all.
So, so this is more her side of the story, and I wondered, is there an
Yeah.
Isaac side to the story?
Yeah.
Because as I went through this, I'm like, I want to hear Isaac's part of this, because this
Mm,
is, I mean, it starts out with some, I mean, dude, we start out a book with pictures like this, you know,
yeah.
that's pretty profound. That's brutal.
Yeah.
Exploded vertebrae and
Mm-hmm.
quadriplegic, and here you are, clearly functioning and moving. I've seen
Yeah.
you moving around all kinds of times when we've been talking.
I'm
You're a walking miracle and
quite
like a
the
serious
mover.
companion.
So
Like you're a punch in the face to the medical prophets of Baal that like to prophesy death and destruction over people every day.
oh, oh yeah. Like I'm so glad straight from the jump, Yeshua was just like, something's crazy is gonna happen to you. Just trust me. And I was like, okay. So
Now, if you would you tell people about what happened on, is it April 10th? Is it April 10th
I
or
think it was
August 10th?
August
August.
20th.
Ah,
Yeah,
will you tell
yeah.
people about that? Take us back there.
So
By the way, this is Isaac. For those of you that are watching,
oh yeah,
this is
so your
Isaac, by the
channel.
way. Isaac,
I'm
he's my
Isaac.
time.
I am the background guy for Hebrew Hawaiian. So and the family is currently I think in Tahiti. So yeah, they were like, "Oh, can you take over?" I was like, "Sure." I don't like being on camera, but I got you.
That's
But
good.
as far as taking me back, yeah, so I grew up, in the church in like places of worship, I guess you could say. And then I happened to be at like a church conference, like one of those camp retreat things. And I was in the building and I was just, having a normal worship session. And I don't know, the Ruach Kodesh just kind of hit me and he made me drop to my knees and then he spoke and he was like, I'm gonna put you through something. I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but just remember that everything is for my glory and trust me. And I think a week later after the conference, I was driving with my mom. We are driving back up to her place because before my parents got together, they had separate houses. And so I was riding with my mom back up to the house in the town we call Wahiwa. And I told her, and I looked right at her, and I was like, I told her exactly what the spirit told me, and I was like, hey, something's gonna happen, and I don't know when, but all I know is that it's gonna be used for His glory. And she was just like, oh, okay, like, kind of, typical brush it off, like it's probably just some crazy thing that my son's saying. And then, yeah, a week later, I was hanging out with some of my friends. Now, this is the part that I can't really remember. It might have been because the smoking marijuana, but like we all like it was three of my friends and then me. We all decided to go to the beach that morning, and we were all just kind of like hanging out, doing our thing. And it was a Saturday morning, I believe. And I just finished my chores, and then I asked my dad, "Hey, is it cool if I go?" And I remember him telling me later he kind of hesitated, but then he was like, "All right, yeah, go ahead." And so I got in the car, my friend drove down, and then all of a sudden I just felt like this weird feeling like maybe I should hop in the water. And so I hopped in like I was on my way over there. I like, jumped like I normally do, like right into the water, and I blacked out. Like everything just went dead. And then I woke up and I was, face first in the water, and I couldn't move. Like I was attempting to move, but I couldn't. And I could hear my friend in the background, and he was like, "Isaac, are you okay?" And I was like, I obviously didn't say anything. So, and then he was just like, "You're not kidding, right?" And then I was just stuck there. And I guess a youth pastor from another church just happened to be at the beach that day, and he saw everything that happened. And so he got right to it. He called the lifeguard, and then I guess he jumped in the water. This is just the details they told me after. And like, I believe as they were pulling me out, I blacked out again. And then I remember waking up again, and I was on the sand, just sprawled out with my face up like this. Oh, it's freaking me out. And then like I was just like thanking them. I was like, "Thank you so much. You pulled me out the water. I couldn't move." And then they were like, "Okay." And then I blacked out again. And then I woke up again, and I guess they had me sprawled out on like one of the what was it, like the
Backboard.
yeah, on the backboard. But then they also had me on top of like a table, like like one of those beach tables with like the chairs that are connected to it. And so they had me on there, and they were hosing me down. And then I guess while they were hosing me down, somebody saw my legs twitching, and then they were like, "Oh, that's a good sign." And so yeah, I was totally just out. And I guess my friend had grabbed my phone, called my dad, and then like I woke up again, and I see him over me, just like with the most panicked look on his face. Like I to this day I have never seen that face from him. And he was just freaked out. And so yeah, I saw him again, and then I blacked out again. And then I guess I had like woken up, like kind of like incoherently, as they were wheeling me into for surgery. And this is what my mom told me after. She said, "Yeah, you were like getting wheeled into surgery, and you looked right at me, and you were like, 'Hey, mama, it's gonna be okay.'" Like, like, and I was just like, I don't remember that at all. Yeah, and she said I looked like so confident, and I looked right at her, and I was just like, "It's gonna be okay." And I don't think that was me, honestly.
Yeah.
And she just like, I guess she let them take me. I got wheeled in. I happened to find out that the best spinal surgeon just happened to be on the island that day, and they called him in. And then so they rushed me over to Queens. They threw me into surgery. And yeah, like we had mentioned earlier, the doctors wanted to give their own little diagnosis about what exactly happened. But they were like, "Yeah, he may never walk again. It's basically the same injury as Christopher Reeves." And we all see what happens to him. And so they were like, "Yeah, you may never walk again." And I honestly did not pay any mind to it. So
what was
like,
injured on your body?
Oh, so what had happened was I believe, shattered my C4. And so like the front part of the area. So what had happened was, when I jumped into the water, I had there's like, when the waves are crashing, they create like, this like little dip on the shore break. And I happened to just hit like the dip right in there, like head first. And yeah, and then it just threw my neck down and completely shattered my C4 bone, like right over here. And yeah, so
Unbelievable.
yeah, I
Your
mean,
your story is unbelievable, truly. For folks that haven't even heard, I just finished reading through that book Lisa, his mom, wrote today, and this is the end of a very long, brutal, arduous life that you have already had. Many experiences that came to a real culmination point, and this was like right at a key turning point of your life. You're like preparing to like leave high school and start a whole new career and experiences, and now you're in like ICU, going in to try to get your neck rebuilt.
Yeah, that was around the time I had actually just turned over a new leaf. Like, Yeshua grabbed me, and he was like, "No, you're gonna follow what I want you to follow." And I was like, Oh, okay. And I'd spent a lot of time like, doing stupid stuff and school, smoking a lot of, other stuff. So, but yeah, so did I cut out at all on your end?
You just cut out just for a brief second there.
Okay, all right. Yeah, because I'm starting the channel right now. So I figured it might have created a little bit of a lag. So,
Yeah.
but I got the intro going. So
Okay. Are you supposed to go live at 9:30? Are we going live?
yeah. So yeah, we are going
I'm glad
live.
you're telling me now this time.
That's why I was like, maybe we should be talking about this later, but it's totally fine. This
Dude,
is for
I'm
your
glad.
channel, and I appreciate it.
But
So
I want to just at least give people a little intro to you because you've got an incredible testimony, and I'd love to be able to hear more and more about it too from your side of things because
yeah.
I know when anybody else writes your story, it's never your story in the same way. You know,
Mm,
you had a very different lens with which you saw the world, and it's a valuable one. And I think a lot of people that have been deeply broken and come from incredibly broken, absolutely perverse, disgustingly painful starting points have some of the most beautiful stories of redemption I've ever heard in my life. And I love getting an opportunity to let others hear their voices.
yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think the same way all the time. So anyway, we are live, guys, and we've kind of already started. But as you remember, this is Nathan Reynolds. He's back on the channel. He was so kind and generous enough to uh have another interview with us. So I know it's a little bit at a weird different time, but I was grateful that I was able to work around your schedule so that it worked for
Thank
you.
you.
So yeah, again, Nathan Reynolds. Here he is, guys. You wanted him back? Here he is. So,
So glad to
but
be here, Isaac. Thanks for having me back on. I had an absolute blast last time I was here with you and then Isaac and Lisa, and I had Noble on maybe just about a week ago to do just a dive into Hebrew and studying and books, and he walked me through and around the library, and I was just like drooling, man. It was like somebody getting to show me all their guns. It made me real
yeah,
excited. And
yeah.
you've got
He's
quite a
not a
place.
prideful person, but he's definitely educated, and he's very proud of what Yeshua has led him through, and a
Mm,
lot of those books have to do with that. So
mm,
yeah, but
yeah,
we were currently talking about my journey,
yeah.
I suppose, but he ended up finishing my mom's book, A New Creation, and links in Sacred Word Publishing if anybody wants to still pick it up. Yeah, it's basically just my life journey, and as he stated earlier, it is through my mom's perspective. I had no say or any input in any of the things that were wrote in there, so please do not ask me questions unless it's from my perspective, because I have no idea. So
Have you read it at least? Have you
nope.
read it? Oh my gosh. Dude, you've got to read the book. It's like
uh,
it's real good to hear it from somebody else's perspective because
mm.
there's things your mom saw that were very different than what you saw,
Oh
in
yeah,
that
I
same
don't doubt
regard,
it.
and it'll give you a totally different lens. But I'm always trying to advocate that people who have lived a very atypical lifestyle, and I mean just from the very beginning point of your life, I can't even begin to wonder what it's like for you to bounce around from homes from basically birth to 6 years old, and what a different foundation point that gave you to just
Mm-hmm.
starting life, and then to go from that to what happened growing up with your mom and her previous husband and all the complexities that came into there. I think you've done a tremendous job of being a living witness of testimony of what can happen when, like you said, when Yeshua grabs a hold of somebody. And you were going down a very different road not too long ago, and to see the progress and the transformation that's taken place in your life is tremendous. And it's
Yeah.
exciting. It's exciting. And I think it's the most powerful tool you have is to share your words of testimony. It is truly our weapon against this great dragon that we wrestle against.
Yeah. I gotta praise Yahweh all the way, because there's no way we would come around to any of the truth without him, right? So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I have been reading your book when I get bits and pieces when work's not as chaotic as it can be.
Mm,
And yeah, it was powerful to hear that some of the things that you had not remembered kind of like resurfaced. And then you notice that like the patterns that you were normally used to doing had kind of just like risen up out of nowhere, and you totally became a different person. And um I don't know if you really want to talk about it, but I was totally curious on like what that kind of felt like in a sense, because you do give some detail in the book, but I wanted to know like from like straight off the rip mental perspective on like essentially what that felt like. Was like was an isolated feeling?
It's a great question. So like I guess for those that don't maybe know specifically what you're talking about, I started out with the book sharing a lot of the just the difference in perspectives of what happens with like, so I have something that they call dissociative identity disorder, which means, or it used to be classified as multiple personality disorder. And this arises
Yeah.
when people go through extreme trauma, extreme forms of abuse, and the mind will separate itself in order to endure the trauma that's taking place and create a literal trauma pocket, a trauma neural network that's like isolated and separated from the rest of the main core of the identity of the personality. And that's as a survival mechanism to overcome what is an inescapable, overwhelming, just inundation. Like even you were just sharing in your story, like you don't remember the entirety of the events of what happened from when you dove into the water to, you know, popping awake occasionally, but your body still was physically present for throughout the time in that. There's times when you were awake and talking to people that you don't physically remember, and
Yeah,
your brain
exactly.
is going through something so extreme and so traumatic, it starts to lock away and isolate segments of itself in order to overcome what is an insurmountable situation. And so my body went through horrible abuse and systemic abuse that was designed to shatter the mind and cause trauma that created new personalities. And those core personalities were then utilized by an organized criminal organization, a syndicate that was masterminded by the Black Robe priests of the Jesuits down in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, and abroad all over the United States, and specifically centered in Arizona, where my family was raising criminals to do all kinds of filthy, disgusting stuff. And so I was trapped in that kind of mindset. But on my core side of my main, like, they call it like your presenting self or whatever else, was just a very more or less happy, jovial person who went by the name Nate all the time. And there was a very distinct version of that was very alive and bubbly and happy and a very strong kind of Christian character. And it's like my day side, my presenting side. But then at night, I had this very different side to myself that was extremely depressed, extremely lonely and bitter and filled with night terrors, just inexplicable, constant dread of the night. I had horrible insomnia growing up throughout my life, just teeth chattering, dread, peeing the bed, bleeding out my nose constantly, puking blood into the toilet, just terror that would just creep over me and consume me at night. And just this absolute shakes and tremors constantly, like a restlessness and a hypervigilance, like had to stay awake and watch out the window and watch at the cracks of everyone's doors and walk around the house and make sure everyone's where they were supposed to be, and jamming chunks of wood under the doors to make sure that nobody was getting in. Just this absolute dread that things were coming into the night to take me and devour me. And so I kind of went through this life with this really split aspect of who I was. And it really, on the front side of my life, was never really presented. I didn't share that out really until high school, when I started going to I changed schools constantly. My family moved me around all the time to hide the obvious signs of abuse and all. It's hard to really, when you start having major physical trauma happening on an ongoing basis, it's hard to not make it noticeable. Like it becomes clear that something's really going wrong with this child. If you spend enough time around any teacher or any friend group, sooner or later somebody has a dim wit around that's like, oh, something's super jacked up with this guy, and what's going on. And so my family, anytime I kind of popped up onto the radar anywhere, if it was for excellence or for idiocracy, I masked a lot of who I was with just playing dumb and acting like the class clown. I figured out that you could kind of distract everyone if you were just acting stupid and kind of self-harming.
Relatable.
Yeah. And just kind of became a jokester. And I was moving around all the time, so I didn't have like a solid friend group ever. As soon as I had a solid, like, strong relational tie with anyone, my family moved me. And so there was just this like constant displacement, just disruption, a perpetual disruption to who I was and what was going on with me all the time. And so I lived between that schism, and it really wasn't until I was like, I don't know, my parents homeschooled me when I was 15, and
Mhm.
I was so trapped around the constant like mind control, just trapped. Like it was like, the obsession that year was just like nonstop obsession with like military stuff. It was like only ever military stuff. They were really grooming me to go into the United States Air Force Academy and to become this soldier for them. And so it was just continual, perpetual that and like violent military games, like video games, like perpetually. And anyways,
Yeah.
I was like stuck there for a long time. And then I went to a public high school after that, and it was like game on. You know, it was like finally I had freedom to kind of pick my peer group, and I
Yeah.
finally like my physical body had been stunted from so much trauma for so long that I never like grew after I was like under 5 foot till I was 17 years old. Like I didn't grow right. My
Wow.
feet never grew right. My feet still never grew properly. Like my body was physically stuck and trapped in that
Mm.
age for so long. And I looked very young. And so that's what was part of like what catered to abuse for so long. But when I finally kind of started becoming a man, you know, like girls were really attracted to me. And so I really got into like seeking out attention from girls. And that was the first time in relationships that like I had my own cell phone and I started talking to girls at night. And then I was just this very dark other person, you know, and that was the first inkling of that I ever started sharing with other people. I shared about self-mutilation. I started sharing about how I would drug myself to oblivion at night and all of this
Mm.
other side of me that I'd never loosed anywhere else. I started drinking, and the first time I got drunk with one of my best friends, I just cried uncontrollably in a hot tub, just cried hysterically like I've never cried, just like overwhelming sorrow. Anytime I took mind altering substances, it was just uncontrollable sorrow, just like somebody was dying, you know, like I was dying all the time. And so I didn't drink. Nobody wanted to drink with me after that. It's not exactly the life of the party. Um, so it was just like I got into this place in my life where I was in the United States military, and I went and got a part of all of these like super soldier psycho killer programs where yeah, I just volunteered for every opportunity they wanted. I could ever
Yeah.
want to go just hunt people down. I just wanted vengeance so bad. I wanted to kill people and I wanted to be killed. That was it. I had a deep, deep, deep desire to die, but I didn't want to kill myself. I always wanted to die, but I never wanted to kill myself. So I just wanted somebody else to kill me and die a hero's death. Like in our culture, it's just like the gods of the military are the only like men that were allowed to be like, you're a real man, you know? And so when I ended up going through this season where I was finally like a part of a team and finally a part of a brotherhood. And it even sounded like when I was reading your story, that was something like you were really desiring to go into as the military, or your mom at least was saying she really wanted you to go to the military. She thought the structure would really help you and all the rest of that. And
Yeah.
but she's like, somebody else take this boy and make him into this, you know.
We're in a
And
different military now. So
yeah, true story, man. The father's always recruiting, man. There's a way better army that's always recruiting. And
Mhm.
it doesn't care how many felonies you have, by the way.
Oh,
Just
definitely
saying.
not.
And you know, I when I finally I got out of the military after like all my hopes and dreams were completely crushed by this 3-star general at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, who's over the JSOC. And I threatened his life because he made me kill somebody that was another guy like me, and I just been completely fed up with seeing just duplicity and hypocrisy everywhere I went in the military. And it was the same criminal organization, just without the religious side of it, as like the Jesuits and just the disgusting horror of Babylon had. And I got to a place in my life where I was so depressed and so crushed because everything I'd ever hoped for going into the military was gone. And I was going to CU Boulder, University of Colorado at Boulder at the time, and studying psychology, and totally lost, just totally in despair and hopeless. And it was one of the worst seasons of my life. And I was on so many medications. Military's like solution to anytime they train up any of these soldiers is to just drug them until they kill themselves, or basically get them super addicted to all kinds of mind altering drugs, then take them off of them and then until they kill themselves. That's literally how the United States people are like, why are so many soldiers killing themselves? I'm like, it's because the Veteran Affairs, VA, by design, same people that ran the Nazi concentration camps, run the Veterans Affairs Department. The literal same computer softwares that's been used for a long time to eliminate and kill people is being used to systemically murder all our soldiers and suicide them.
Yep.
So tuck that away. It's well worth your research and your time and your diligence to study and evaluate what it is I'm talking about there, if you have any care and consideration for the people that have been your war
I
fighters.
absolutely agree.
Yeah, it is a murder organization. That's all it's there to do, because you don't want a bunch of guys who are highly skilled individuals that dismantle countries overnight to be suddenly loose when they realize that the empire they've been serving are literally the black dragons of death everywhere. And you're like, so maybe we should put those skills to use somewhere else, you know? And they have a good duty to do so, you know? So anyways, there was this like season where I had this like I realized I'd started reading my Bible again and going to this church that had this like you like you connected really strongly with a peer group at a church, and it was unconditional love, maybe. I don't know about that. It was love, I don't know that it was unconditional. I found out
It
later
was
it wasn't.
something.
It was love. It was love. It was a
I
love
think
that
it
I
was.
had. There was reciprocity was definitely a key component of it. And anyways, that whole super friendly, happy church going side of me was just abundantly loved there. And it was like everybody liked the Nate show. I could make people laugh, and it was like I knew lots of the scripture and was good at speaking, and I was passionate about psychology at the time, and I really believed that like I wanted to help people heal. I've always had a desire to help others, unless I want to kill them, and it's totally different sides of me. Most people have too. They just don't know it. But I was just like, I was going through the season where I was seeing like great healing and restoration when I finally got off all these pharmaceuticals that they've been drugging me with all the time. And I had like had this new sense of understanding. Like my brain started turning on a little bit. Go figure, when you get off 17 pharmaceuticals, you're like, I don't have to be a total drug addict the rest of my life. And no, I don't have to have these incurable mental health disorders the rest of my life. Like maybe these people just made up all this stuff in this DSM-5 Bible. It's the sorcerer's Bible where they made up words to just throw diagnoses on people so they could drug them to death. It's a pretty interesting thing when they give you an incurable lifelong mental health disease, and then they're like, by the way, here's all the drugs that we'll sell you for. They're like, they've got a really good conveyor belt of profitability margins worked in with these incurable diseases on something that has no basis or test for it. Anyways, I was super relieved, and I started feeling like a completely different person. Like I was restored in a different way, and I was finding peace and satisfaction. And it was into that process where I met Chelsea about, I don't know, maybe this is like a year and a half into going to that church, maybe a year, about a year and a half that I met Chelsea. Anyways, I had given a speech at the church. They wanted me to get up on stage and share my testimony and stuff like that. And this was a huge church, by the way, at the time. It's called Flatirons Community Church, and it was a burgeoning church that was like the fastest growing college ministry in the United States. It was just exploding everywhere. They went from a couple hundred to like 1,800 really fast. And so it was like the place to be. And it was very much like this Me Too culture, non-denominational, like basically anything goes as long as, we smear Jesus on stuff all the time. It was like there was good stuff in there, and a whole lot of seditious, disgusting doctrines that later on I like burned books that I wrote about. You're like, you don't know until you know, and then you suddenly can't not see what was going on there. And it ended up becoming a very money hungry place. Still is. It's a great place for money laundering. It's one of the most effective money laundering organizations in the state of Colorado. And because of that, I began to see behind the scenes in there. And when I ended up meeting Chelsea at a community group there, and she met this Nate side of me, this very happy, passionate, joyful side of me. And so that's who she met. That's who she dated and got to know, and was like, everything was kind of cruising along. Like I was finally going to have this marriage to this woman who was so much out of my league. I had no hopes and dreams of ever being with her. And so I just put her in the friend zone forever and was like, that's the only place we're ever going to be in. And then that blew up straight in my face. And so I went to Afghanistan and was like,
not to cut you off or ruin this amazing talk that we're having so far, but I forgot to hit live, so they're only seeing it now. So guys,
hey,
again,
y'all.
this is Nathan Reynolds. He's back again. Whatever you missed in the past 20 minutes, go check his channel out later and go see it. So, oh my gosh, I don't feel stupid about it at all, because I'm just like, this is so captivating. I was like so focused, and then I looked at the chat and they were like, oh, there's nothing going on yet. And I was like, oh, that was my fault.
Well, they'll catch it up. They'll be all right. I'll jump right back
definitely.
in.
You guys will love.
So
what
this
he's
crazy
saying
stuff happened. I was raised by secret society of nightmares, and then we're back to the present kind of time frame. We'll just jump you ahead real quick. We're talking about split personalities and dissociative identity disorder and mind controlled slaves.
We started about split personalities, and then we tangent into split government officials.
Oh yeah, man. I'm just talking about the corruption, the system that runs the world. I go all kinds of directions because my mind works like a banyan tree. It's a beautiful, horrifying place. You don't want to hang out there too much. And but he was, Isaac had asked me about just the experiences of shifting between personalities as I went from this core, happy, normal, day walking Christian side of me to a very miserable, angry, and cold person. And that morph happened during the beginning years of my marriage. And my wife, who had gotten to know me as this very different person, suddenly got to meet a different man. And it's not like I introduced myself to her either. I was just pissed. That's basically the whole core tenet of Nathan, like the whole other side of me. I changed my name when I was like 7 years old because I went through this horrific stuff that just completely destroyed me, and I came out of it with this new name and this new personality, and I never smiled or showed my teeth or anything else, and was like trapped there from like 7 years old on. And so then, like, during the course of my marriage, there's a lot of people that wanted to get me back into assassination programs. My family are like corporate. They're a criminal organization, an organized crime family that does strategic eliminations is what they call it. It's called assassinations elsewhere. It's called murder in some places. It's just frowned upon to say that word in my family. It's just they're oath keepers of this Jesuit organization, and they literally enforce the oaths with like bloodshed and violence and torture and rape and incest and all kinds of disgusting matters. They are fully given over to the great whore of Babylon. And anyway, so they wanted to get me back onto them. I was this man of half of me was totally committed to violence and wanted vengeance for all these people that had abused me and passed me around and sold me around like a pedophile with a new pimp, with a new mark all the time. And so during our marriage, it was like I went from joyful to despairing. And all of my friends that I'd once known, and like all the people, like my best man at my wedding, and all the people that were my groomsmen, and people I went to church with and had known for, I don't know, 5, 6, maybe 7 years, like, didn't matter to me. Like, it wasn't necessarily overnight. They just no longer, I had no emotional connection to anyone. Like, it's really hard to explain that to somebody who has maybe never experienced that. But one of my favorite people to talk to about this with are people that have suffered from what's called TBIs and traumatic brain injuries, or MTBIs, people that have experienced comas and they come out of it with a major loss of memory, short-term or long-term memory loss, because there is literally a disconnect from your capacity to feel anything when meeting people that you have known for years, and technically you kind of know somewhere that there's somebody, but like, I literally didn't know their names anymore. I didn't know who they were, didn't know anything about them. Like, I had a book. I used to always keep these little waterproof journals with me everywhere, because after that, all that stuff that happened in the military, they put me on all these drugs and tried to brainwash me to kill myself and destroy everything that I ever knew. I couldn't remember my own name. I couldn't remember how to shower. I literally had to walk around campus. This was my freshman year of college. Like, I was in such a stupor. I walked around with a cane. Like, I couldn't hardly walk and move. And so I literally had to write down everything that happened. Every person I met, I'd write down their name, shirts they were wearing, things to remember them by, like school assignments. And I was just this perpetual like vegetable, like a walking dead, And it was like I was in rehab, basically trying to recover my mind, recover my body, like proprioception. I had lost a lot of my balance and my ability to move and my motor skills. And so like, that's how a lot of those people at that church, Flatirons, like got to know me with, like, I used to have all this stuff. I used to use all these like mental tools all the time. And I had heart halter monitors for this tachycardia and stuff. I was having all this heart problems, and they were just having me on so much meth, they call it, Adderall and stuff these days, but it's just methamphetamines. It's just a fancy way for rich people to get high all the time, and to get their children high all the time, and to make sure that their children just shut up and sit still and do whatever they want. And they just drug them to death, literally. And so I was like a very, very cold person towards my wife. She went from having a very loving, passionate person to a very miserable, lonely person. And that shift, Isaac, was freedom on one side of it, because I had wanted out. Like, I'd been in a box, like a prison cell, for a long time. And so one side of me was super relieved to get out, and the other side of me was in utterly sorrowful, because it was like I was destroying every relationship in my life. And this is like my survival mechanism, is just start to just become completely apathetic towards everyone, anywhere, like all people, humans, and like to see them as a subspecies. Like, you have to dehumanize people to start killing them wholesale. And so then I started, but at the same time, I got this job as a wilderness instructor up in the mountains, and I didn't have technology up there, and I was like free to just wear guns and knives and just climb into caves and tunnels and go into the depths of that's all I ever want to do, really, when that side of me is out. I just want to go into deep, dark, scary places and like find creatures and hybrids. That's all I really want to do. I feel like all I want to do is go preach the gospel to hybrids. That's it. Nothing else. I want to just like screw the whole surface dwelling world and go back to the people that made me. and make sure that they know there's some version of hope. And there's still some decent people up here. There's just not many. Most of them suck, and they're pretty miserable, and they're awful, more or less. But then, you know,
I guess that's what happens when Yeshua hits the factory reset button, and it's like everything totally just shifts. So
yeah, it was definitely something like that. And it was being up in the wilderness, man, that started to give me hope that there was something else up here, that there was something of value, that maybe my wife and I could have something like intimacy, like a real relationship again, that she could find some way to navigate loving this person that was just absolutely indifferent towards her, like totally apathetic towards her. Like I had no feelings towards her whatsoever, which is, I'm a pretty strong, passionate, emotional person. And to go from that, which she'd known me for 2 years before we got married, and then this was like 3 or 4 years in, and just like there was nothing anymore. And it was really cold. And we were both working at the time, so it was very different. You know, you could kind of excuse it as we're just working and busy, but then it just became very obvious. You know, it became very obvious. I wanted nothing to do with that. And I started wearing body armor and guns and buying all kinds of survival and prep gear and talking about the end of the world, and started talking to her all about these just secret societies and all this other world that was out there, talking about child sex abuse and all this stuff that like was going on out there, but not really telling her about what I'd been through. You know what I mean? And so I was dropping hints, to put it real plainly. I was always testing people to see if anybody was actually willing to ever listen to what happened to me, because most people are just sissies. Yeah,
so,
most people are sissies, and they can't handle hearing anything, let alone reality. You know, you're like, there's poison in your drinking water, and they're like, I don't care. You know, you're like, you're probably not going to handle like satanic ritual abuse. You know what I mean? You're like, we'll get there someday. And thankfully, people are starting to figure it out a little bit more. They're like, hey, maybe there is a radical, intelligent evil that's stalking all of us. So that's kind of honestly what it felt like, Isaac. It wasn't like an overnight thing for me. Honestly, it wasn't an overnight thing. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I just suddenly went from being Nate to Nathan, and it was not fun. You know, but at the same time, I was really happy to have guns and happy to have knives and start making poisons and start preparing to just butcher all the pedophiles in Boulder. And I was like, this is gonna be great. And then I was like, yeah, but I got this wife at home. What am I gonna do now? I can't just live in the caves, you know? So it was, Yeshua was definitely working on me.
Yeah. The prayer is that people will recognize that there are evils without ever witnessing it. You know what I mean? Like recognizing that it's there without ever having to experience. And I think that in a way, there's like a sense of purity that's lost when you know, are exposed to those types of things. But I know that Yeshua always has a plan for whatever that happens to be. So that's why it's kind of like, you know, it's like I wish that we would all just like have our eyes open to the radical evil that exists and just know that it's there without having to witness it, you know?
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I sometimes pray people witness it every day. You know, sometimes I pray they experience it and they know what it feels like to have somebody's blood that they love drip all over their face, and they can do nothing about it. They look at the world really differently.
That tangible reality,
yeah.
right?
They would, people that know death, they know, I mean, people that know extreme violence, let me put it that way. People that know extreme violence have a completely different lens through which they see the world. And it's because we live in a very insulated society today. This wasn't normal. The version of life that we all live today is a ridiculous, absolute construct of some kind of beast system, because war used to be a very present state of normal human experience. Normal person experience used to be intense violence, like an actual reality that like lots and lots and lots of people experienced violence on a regular basis. And that's not bad. I know it's not ideal, but what it does is it creates a value. It creates a savor to simple things. You savor sweet, peaceful moments like never before. Like my like, I don't ever complain about food. I don't complain about food. My wife makes any kind of food. I'm thankful. I'm thankful every time I eat. Like, I'm genuinely thankful every time I eat, because I've starved. Like, not just like kind of hungry, like starved, utterly starved. And it's very different when you go through that. I talked to this guy who was a butcher in this town out here in Missouri, who's an incredible butcher. And he was all about dry aging his meats, 21 days or 45 days. And he was trying, he got super passionate when I talked about bison. There was this guy who was like, hey, he called me and was like, do you want some buffalo hides? And I was like, yes. so badly. I want to make buffalo leather. I want to live in a teepee in the forest and never come back, you know? And so like, I'm like, yeah, you betcha. I want a buffalo
Stop, you're
hide.
making me want to do it.
It's amazing, man. A buffalo coat. I'm gonna get sidetracked on buffalo. I promise we'll circle back to death again. But dude, buffalo, check this out. People have lived with a buffalo jacket in like minus 60 degrees out in the plains, like the most ferocious kick in the teeth
Wow.
Canadian winters. People in buffalo hides
Just
just
wrapped in
thriving.
buffalo hide.
That's it,
Wow.
man. I just want to experience that so badly. And this like 10-year-old last year gave me a sheep hide that I was just walking around the forest and feeling like a grizzly bear. It was so fun. And I'm like, I want a buffalo hide. So, anyways, I've been on this hunt to get a buffalo hide, and I've been praying and asking Yahoo to open a door. And sure enough, I met a buffalo wrangler and was like, yes. And I was like, could I ever get a buffalo hide? He's like, yeah, they throw them out. I'm like, what? Yes. So, anyways, I drive to this. I take my daughters on a field trip, dad style, and I'm like, we're gonna go to a place where I cut animals into pieces. It's gonna be terrific. And so they wear flip flops, which is a terrible choice. And we get to this like
Yeah.
garage. We get to this like garage
In
looking
between
place.
your tickly toes.
Oh yeah, bro. You know it's gonna get gory. But they've seen me butcher animals. Like this is how I like. I needed a new skill set. I love knives and I love cutting stuff to pieces. And you know it's
Yeah.
super frowned upon these days to go kill people, so I just don't. And so there's like I was like I got to have some new skill set to do with this. And artisanal butchering has been a huge outlet, like a tremendous, wonderful thing, so I can sharpen blades to scary stuff. And then people are like, hey, can you help me butcher stuff? And I love it. Anyways, but I've never butchered large animals. I've never done large animals. Like a buffalo is gigantic. Like their heads can weigh hundreds of pounds, just their heads. And so I didn't know that at the time. I was really ignorant. And he was like, I was like, I want to brain tan them. You can, there's enough brain matter in the head of every animal to tan the hide of the animal. It's called brain tanning. And I was like, I want to do that, you know? And so I was like, could I have the heads too? And he's like, sure, they're going to throw the heads out. And I'm like, yes. So I agreed to take on these 2 buffalo hides and then, and their 2 heads. And then I agreed to 2 more and 2 more heads. So I'm like, I don't have any freezers, and that's a terrible decision. So I'm like, we're just gonna get rowdy. Anyways, we go there. He's got these 2 bison get dropped off. It's just ridiculous. And my buddy's like, these are pretty small ones. They were still like 1,000 pounds, which is like a decent sized cow, you know. And their heads were just enormous. And I was like, oh no, I can't fit that in any freezer known to man. This is not good. And but I was talking to one of the guys who was you know, worked there, and he was real depressed and pissed and miserable and cranky and whatever, and just smoking cigarettes to blot out his sorrows. But then the owner came out. I think his name's Andrew, and he was a former special forces guy. And it's not just kind of some special forces. Like the dude liked to look through optics and shoot people in the throats when they were eating sandwiches. Sniper guy, super friendly human, terrifying different person on the other end of a scope. And he shared with me his why. He like walked me in and was showing me the difference between a grass-fed bison and a grain-fed bison, and they had just cut him in half with this giant saw. And he was like, you want to come in? And I'm like, more than anything ever. And they literally are unloading. They're unloading yearling like steers on one side out of a trailer, and the guy's shooting them in the head, you know, next door. And Naomi and Jubilee, you know, I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they like walk in, you know, in their cute dresses and flip flops, and there's just blood everywhere and like running down the drain, and guys cutting the throat of one of them. And dude, it was a great field trip, man. In my world, I'm like, this is the best. And I just told him, I'm like, listen, you go in here, you be respectful, and you stay exactly right next to Daddy. Do you understand? They're gonna be swinging. They are going to be working, and you will stay out of their way. But they've been around me when I work, and I work like that. And so they were really good. And we got to walk right into this area where they're butchering these animals, and they are bone sawing.
Straight
this animal
through.
like 2 feet away from my daughter's faces, and they're just like, wow. And I'm like, this is great. And he's going over all the differences to bison, grass-fed, and grain-fed. And he's showing me the rib structure on the top to just prevent giant lions. The largest lions that ever lived were here in America, 10-footers that weigh 1,000 pounds. Still just ridiculous things. And the bisons have these extra ribs on their back to just resist saber-toothed tigers and their giant 12-inch fangs. And it was just awesome. And then he takes me into his shop and shows me, you know, more of his dry aging room and his smoker. And then he shows me this piece of equipment that looks like Ferrari built it. And he's describing to me this smoker that is one of one. It's like a $1.2 million smoker that's going to take all the moisture out of the meat and dry it exactly right. And just, he's explaining to me this thing that he has been on a quest to find for 15 years. And he tells me because he was starving to death. He got abandoned behind enemy lines in a country I won't name here because we technically don't go kill people there. He was abandoned for weeks weeks. This is this crap the United States military does all the time. They're like, sorry, screw you. Hope you die because you did something it got
Didn't approve
publicized.
of or didn't like.
Well,
Exactly.
it's just it became known and it may not have been known, so they like, it's called deniability, and they're just going to deny you when you do
Yes.
certain stuff. And then they literally will send other people in the military will send their guys after you to murder you, saying you're a rogue asset or you're a terrorist or whatever other lie and propaganda they want to throw. And this is the crap that just makes me want to murder everyone. They do this kind of stuff all the time. And so you think you're fighting for the good guys, and you in fact go out and murder another soldier who is totally doing what he was told to do and eliminating bad guys. And so anyways, he was starving to death, eating bark and bugs and just anything he could to survive. And he literally got this hunger in there and like made a vow that he would do whatever it takes to make sure that soldiers had food, period. And so that's what he had been doing the rest of his life. He got out of there, he escaped and evaded and got across the lines and got evac'd and finally got back to the States and recovered and healed from it, and then went into butchering and began to study and travel all over the world trying to find a way to preserve meats without all these poison preservatives in it. And that was literally that holy grail of that smoker that he had. So you could dehydrate the meat and smoke it, and you could, without sealing it, sit it on a counter and let it be there for 6 months. And he was like, I have literally been waiting all my life for this moment, and that level of hunger drives a man like nobody else. And he was explaining to me the difference of his children, trying to explain to them why he gets so mad when they don't eat all of their food. Like, and his wife is the same way. She comes from a world like my wife, where there's just like, they've never gone without a meal unless they chose to, and like they have no value for these same things. They have no value for life because they've never known death. Like, I'm sure you probably didn't value your legs as much until after your accident. Like, I bet you have a very different perspective on how valuable it is to wipe your own butt. You know what I mean? Like, it's a serious thing. You get real tired of people wiping your butt real quick. Like, it's something you don't want other people to have to feed you like an infant. It sucks. It's humiliating. It like being injured and being incapacitated and experiencing tragedy changes you forever, and it gives you a lens of reality. And I struggle a lot in this society of sissies who have never known torment, who have never known torture. It's really sucks, and it's pretty lonely a lot of times until I get to talk to other people who have been through nightmares, and then I'm like, wow, there's other wonderful people out there in the world who have overcome just filth, and you're like, and they're still doing good. They're doing good, and they joined the right kingdom. They joined the right kingdom, and they're contending for the right cause, and they're not letting the evil that was done to them become evil for everyone else. And so I love hearing survivor stories, and you are absolutely a survivor, Isaac, not just because of the accident, but because of the day you were born, like literally the day you were conceived. You were conceived in a place that should have killed you.
Yeah.
Why are you alive, Isaac? Why are you alive?
That's a very good question. I just found out recently. Well, apparently it's to defend the faith. That's it.
Yeah.
Yep. Because he's been showing me a lot that there's reasons why I have been in the corruption that is very, very systemically altered a lot of the Christian faith, the Catholic faith, And he was like, you experienced this for a reason, and this is this reason. It's because you see the faith for its purity. The purity of the gospel is there, but not everybody witnesses it because of the brainwashing. So that's all it is, really. It's just like, you have to accept it for, like, my dad used to say this before when I was younger, and it kind of like, it struck a nerve on me, but at the same time it was kind of like, I see why he says it. And like, I was reading and trying to study the Bible at the time, or the scriptures, and I was reading it, and then I would do it. And he was like, Isaac, why do you take the scriptures so literal? And I was like, because it's God's word. Like, like, why wouldn't I? Like, right? And of course, he sees that now, like, and not that he never did, but it was just, I think it was more baffling for him to like see somebody just like literally take it word for word. And the reality is that I've always seen that man's interpretation of the word that gets intertwined with the actual word itself or the scriptures itself can be such a deterrent.
Yeah.
Like, it can really take people on a path that, like, they no longer see the face of Yahweh. They just see what they created themselves. And it's always bothered me in that sense. And so, that's why he had me grow up in that environment, because it infuriates me like to no end, to see somebody like not read the word for what it, or the scripture for what it is, or not even try to like question a type of aspect of it, or to even think that there's other ways to interpret the scripture, like, in my mind, I think there's only one truth, because there's only one God, and he is truth. So, why would there be any type of like differentiation? The scripture itself says that he is unchanging. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I don't see how somebody can like justify their actions. It goes on a tangent of certain things that happen in our lives because we make excuses for it, and so that's where I'm at. Like, he told me that very plainly when I was talking to my fiance about it. And I told her, I said, it's a beautiful thing to witness the fact that the things that I am sharing with you, and the way that we have been shown by Yahweh and the Ruach Kodesh and Yeshua, the God, is that it's like, it's so easy for you to absorb, like she's just like, okay, I get it. Like, and it baffles my mind, because there's scholars out there that have studied for years that cannot get this truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just brings to mind the fact that I too received it in the same way. And it's so beautiful to witness it, because it's like, I grew up in all of that corruption and all of that, but then Yahweh still had his hand on me. And then for me to witness in our own lives that she too has that same like aspect of what it means to just accept the gospel for what it is. And it was just like, I had an epiphany in that moment, and Yahweh was just like, she is here to show you what the purity of the gospel looks like, and you are here to defend it. And that was just, it blew my mind. And that's what I'm here for. I literally just got the answer like 2 months ago. I've been waiting for this answer a long time, Nathan. And I was just like, thank you. Like, thank you. Like, I finally know my purpose. But I know why. I know in a way why he held back but at the same time, I know in a way why everything that has happened in my life has happened for the reasons that it has happened. And it's like I said, like, I get so infuriated that anybody can take any sort of truth out of context,
Yeah.
So yeah. That's
You
what
got a
I'm here
hunger
for.
for the truth, man. It's good. It's good. Apologetics, defending the faith, This is why, like, you got to be careful not to use the word "I'm sorry" all the time. I tell people, like, I apologize is called defending your position. It's like, I'll defend my position. You don't always have to say I'm sorry. Sometimes you have to say you're sorry if you're at fault. But sometimes you have to defend your position, which is more often, and having a firm foundation with which to do that. Your story inspired the heck out of me. And I know maybe it's not your story, but it's your testimony from your mom's perspective, that's for sure. And being born to a mother that I mean, put every substance she could in your body that should have killed you and should have destroyed you and made you incapable of ever being a highly functioning person. She's like, the sanctity of the womb was not sanctified for you in the same way, and you were given a very different start to life that could have, I mean, left you with a lot of wounds and a lot of pain, and yet it also seemed to numb you from a lot of experiences that most people have. And yet I see that similar childlike simplicity of trust and faith in your Father, like your Heavenly Father. And that's the core tenet of what kept me motivated at the end of the day. As much as I was embittered towards the monsters that were around me, and seeing, like, I saw so much duplicity, like you just described, in the church. I saw such a franchise Christianity. I say that very strategically for a reason, because I've watched early on, back in the early 90s, and the Christian church began to turn to business leaders to be their consultants. So they started making this change to the direction of churchianity, and started branding them. They started using literally the same model as what franchises use, where they had branding specifically, just like Chick-fil-A has its branding, and then they had franchises where you'd have one main church, and then you'd have the breakout of all these other churches that went from it. And this model literally came from people that were greedy for gain. And it says plainly in the scriptures, greediness for gain is idolatry, and then people are like, why is the last words? This has always blown my mind. It's like, why? First John, I'm just going to read something, because this just, I love this, man. First John is a savage book, and one of those books that lots of those scholars hate. This is one of those books that you just see, you're like, they read First John and they're like, yeah, we're not going to talk about that anymore. We're not going to talk about that anymore. It's not for you. They made up this word called dispensationalism to just cut pieces out of the Bible they don't like and just throw them out and burn them. And they're like, oh, those darn dang Satanist bad guys, they burn in Bibles. I'm like, y'all be throwing out Bible books every single day. Like, I've been inside those places, man. I was raised in private Christian schools along with public schools and homeschools, and I've seen all kinds of versions of this. A lot of the pedophilic monster family members of mine, and just these perverters of justice, they got masters in seminary degrees, and they're like swinging all kinds of smiley stuff in the church movement. And you're like, they just throw out pages like that. They're literally like, I don't want to read about that. I don't care what the definition of sin is according to the scripture. It's an archery term. Yes. I'm like, it says sin is the transgression of the law. Like right here. And they're like, no, it means to miss the mark. I'm like, it doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible. And they're like, yeah, but it's what it means. That if you go back to Greek, it means this kind of phrase where you're shooting an arrow and it misses. I'm like, what the heck are you guys talking about? Shooting arrows. It says sin is the transgression of the law. It's transgression of the Torah. It's like it's a simple command so that you know if you've done wrong. Like, parents give children clear and distinct guidelines so you know, like, this is righteous, this is wicked. This is obedience, this is disobedience. Like, you got to break it down for children, because, they're children and they're learning and they don't know better.
I think you got to say it one more time.
Sin is the transgression of the Torah. Like, that's where it's found. In case you haven't read it, let's just read it, because I didn't rip that part out, right? Or maybe I did.
I'm so ready. Hold on,
I think I really did. Myself. I'll just read it here, because it's totally the page they ripped out. 1 John 3. See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of Elohim. For this reason, the world does not know us, because it did not know him. Beloved ones, now we are children of Elohim, and it has not yet been revealed what shall be. But we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And everyone having this expectation in him cleanses himself as he is clean. Everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. And you know that he was manifested to take away our sins, and in him there is no sin. Everyone staying in him does not sin. Everyone sinning has neither seen him nor known him. Little children, let no one lead you astray. That's literally the word satanic, basically. Like, that's like satanic is to go astray. That's what goats do. Stupid goats. Murder them all. Sometimes I like goats, but they often lead everyone astray. It's literally their difference. Anyways, real quick.
I never caught that connection, but
anytime you see the word going astray, you should think of goats. Gosh dang the goats, man. He separates all the sheep from the goats. He murders all the goats at the end. I've read it. I've dealt with goats. I became a shepherd, and dang it, I wanted to cut the throats of the goats. Not all of them. A couple of them are sweet, and the rest look like they're demon possessed at times as they like break out of fences and mock you on the other side of the highway.
Eyes, come on.
Just creepy creep set Baphomet like eyes. You're like, dang right, Azazel's totally this goat psycho. Well, let all sin be ascribed to Azazel. Why do you think they say that? We have this word they made up called scapegoat. It's not a real word in the Hebrew. It's called Azazel, which is a character, an entity, an individual, fallen
Ah.
angel, cherub, like these fallen seraphim and cherubim and Ophanim, like these rebel watcher angels that descended to Mount Hermon. One of them's name, one of the leaders of them, his name was Azazel. And then you start reading Leviticus, and then you're like, why is it that when they're doing this Day of Atonement, they're like, one sin, one goat gets all these sins ascribed to it. One goat gets ransomed, and they call it the scapegoat, and it's not the word.
Yeah.
It literally says, let all the sin be ascribed to Azazel. And they take that goat and they send it out into the wilderness by the hands of a fit man for 3 days into the wilderness to go to Azazel. And they would literally tie and put all the sins of the nation of Israel that had happened that year on that goat. And they would send it out into the wilderness to the dry desert place where Azazel was bound in chains of darkness and held unto the days of judgment. Super critical stuff. So anytime I see the word astray as I'm reading through the scriptures, I think of those goats, and I think of dang goats that are leading all the sins of the people towards Azazel. Goats make these things called goat trails in the wilderness when they're going around looking for snacks because they're grazers, and they just will run around. They'll eat everything. They'll eat poison ivy. They'll eat briars. They'll eat all kinds of thistles and nightmares that sheep will not eat. Sheep are going to be like very much, sheep want nice pastures more or less, and they will eat less ideal pastures, but they don't make the same trail. Sheep will get in a line and they will move together, whereas goats will do these wandering things. That's why he's always warning you, like, don't be like the goats, be like the sheep. So just tuck that away anytime. Anyways, he says, and the one doing sin, I'll just back up a little children, let no one lead you astray. The one doing righteousness is righteous, even as he is righteous. And what is righteousness? If only there was a Bible verse that could tell us this. If only there was somewhere, anywhere, that said, what is righteousness? And then you're like, David's ultimate doctrinal statement, Psalm 119, savage. I always have a challenge. I always tell people, if anybody memorizes the entirety of Psalm 119 and tells it to me, I will give them a custom knife I made. But in there, Psalm 119, 142 says, your righteousness is righteousness forever, and your Torah is the truth. You're like, the Torah is the truth. If you want foundations of what truth is and his righteousness is, all of these defining terms are built from Genesis to Revelation. And there's continuity. Like, there's continuity of definitions. Like you said, you can actually trust him. He doesn't change ever. And so we know it is righteousness is to do what is pleasing in his sight. And what is pleasing in his sight? To do what he said. You're like, oh, obedience is true, man. When you have children, you're like, oh, it is pleasing when they obey me. It's super pleasing.
It's pretty nice.
Super nice. When they don't, it's definitely not nice. And you're not as inclined to be favoring towards them. Anyways, here it says, the one doing sin is of the devil, the dragon, because the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose, the Son of Elohim was manifested to destroy the works of the devil. Everyone having been born of Elohim does not sin, because his seed stays in him, and he is powerless to sin, because he has been born of Elohim. In this, the children of Elohim and the children of the dragon are manifested. Everyone not doing righteousness is not of Elohim, neither the one not loving his brother, because this is the message that you've heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. That's not as Cain, of who was of the wicked one, and killed his brother. And why did he kill him? Because his works were wicked, but those of his brother were righteous. So do not marvel, my brothers, if the world hates you. Let's just say that again. Do not be surprised. Don't be shocked, y'all, if the world hates you. Wow. We know that we have passed out of death. Everyone's picking on me. It says in Hebrews 11, some of you have endured the scourge of public mockings. Hallelujah, y'all. Rejoice and be glad, because that's what you're supposed to experience. You're not supposed to experience the praise of men. Don't seek the praise of men. That's where you get into King Saul problems. You're like, he liked the people cheering for him. He's like, Samuel, please just esteem me in front of the elders. Please just make sure I look good one more time. Please.
Sought their praise, and that's why he disobeyed. So
nice. Dude, it's a real thing, man. Like, they turn the crowd. I love reading the Bible when it's like all the people go from praising them to like minutes later, it's like, oh, and then those sneaky Jews came in and stirred the crowds up against him, and then they stoned him to death. Like, Saul went from literally, the people were so enamored by the works and the miracles that were happening and the reasonings, wisdom, and logic that he was expressing. He was persuading like an entire city to turn towards the path of righteousness, to become followers of the way, the truth, and the life. By the way, it's like Yeshua. They're like, it was not some Greek Jesus. There was like a Hebrew Jesus. Like a Hebrew Yeshua is a real guy who lived like within the lifetime of these people, and he had turned the world upside down by coming back from the dead. He literally came back from the dead, like an actual thing happened called resurrection. It wasn't some kind of like ethereal felt board Bible story thing they told people one day to make them think a thing. Like he literally came back from the dead, and hundreds of people witnessed this action, and it literally changed the entire world because he conquered death. He took the literal keys of death from the devil, the dragon. The dragon used to hold the keys of death in his hand and used to be the shot caller of death, an actual entity, like a living entity, a literal creature of like a created thing who has the power of death, an actual being. Yeshua went down there and is all like, smack death down, and is all like, mine, son. And he's all like, I don't know that he called him son. He can call him whatever he wants. He gets to, I don't. Anyways, he took death.
Mine, you serpent.
Took captivity captive. Like he literally took captivity captive. And the world became turned upside down. He brought all these people back from the dead with him. All these people came back to life and were walking around and testifying to it. And they're all like, what is happening in Jerusalem? What is even happening over there? Like the whole world became undone. People from every tribe and nation and tongue were going to hear about this. And you know what? He began to send out these people, these emissaries, these apostles, to go to the nations. And he gave them power from on high to do working miracles like the stuff that happened to you, Isaac, like real miracles, not just some kind of ethereal thing that people talk about. Miracles that happen every single day in our society that are covered up by this medical monstrosity. Your mom wrote about it. She wrote about it in this book right here. 29 Doctors, Lisa George. There's another one. This is a true story of my journey through the healthcare system and how medical doctors poisoned me and changed my life. Here's another one. Check this one out. Highly recommend this one from Johnny Cerrucci called The Disciples of Ra. The shocking truth about medicine, viruses, and vaccines. Whoopsies. Everything you've been told about sickness and health is a lie. They have made you sick, impoverished, enslaved, and dead. And wait until you find out who they are. Where does sickness come from? The idea that what makes us sick is something we cannot perceive ourselves is tailor-made for a system of control over the masses by a malignant elite. There is an incredible preponderance of books and writings and testimonies of people who have studied diligently and examined the medical system that we have and began to find out there's all kinds of ulterior motives, and all these priests who swore this oath of the Hippocratic oath to Apollo and all these other deities and these pantheon of other gods, and they're slaves to that same pantheon of gods like Azazel and all the other mighty ones. And they're like, wow, why don't they talk about miracles, Isaac? Why didn't they talk about your testimony constantly? Why wasn't your face on the front door of every single clinic that you ever went into for the healthcare that you got? Why didn't they talk about your story? No, they're like, well, we can't profit off it. We can't trademark and patent your testimony, can we? So we have these other drugs, you guys, that are new and fantastic, and you can trust us. The pharmaceutical representatives say we'll make lots of money if we give these to people, so we're going to do that instead. And it's like, it's disgusting. You get to know that they're all sons of the dragon. You know, they're enamored with it. Now, there's still some righteous, wonderful people that are trapped inside that system and are trying to do good, and the Father uses them in powerful and profound ways. However, I literally believe we are supposed to empty hospitals when we pray. Like, I actually believe that. I believe we are supposed to be walking around and praying for the sick. Literally, not some kind of like, one day some of you might go out and listen to what I'm saying. No, like you actually went out and laid hands on the sick and they got healed. And you could experience that for yourself. Like you could literally get to see miracles done in front of your face. Like people laid hands on Isaac.
Absolutely possible.
When he was a quadriplegic, could not move anything. When he was intubated, when he had a throat cut open, tube shoved down him, force fed, not able to move a muscle, and people prayed for him. And he is sitting there moving his hands in front of your face. He is a living witness to the lying signs and wonders that the devil does through their abominable healthcare system, their sick care system, that there is power that can come from on high that has nothing to do with the pharmaceuticals that they're trying to convince everyone will save them, that you don't have to be dependent on the gods of medicine, the white robe priests, to get your cure, that you can call from him and he can deliver you an answer in a moment. Like you can ask him for wisdom. Any of you who lacks wisdom should ask the Father, not doubting, because he who doubts is like a ship tossed in the sea. Read the book of James. I have this Nature Nate. We just did a meetup yesterday, and I challenged children to like memorize a verse. If you want to go in my treasure chest where I give out all these gemstones and rubies and sapphires and awesome shells, like this shellfire, you know, I like threw them out into this lake and I made them all go out there and find them. And I told them to wake all the babies. Anyways, I made the shellfire. It's super sweet. Anyways, I throw the stuff in the lakes, and anyways, but they have to memorize a scripture verse to get in there and to get into this treasure chest. And they're like, okay, I'll go, I'll go, I'll go. And I'm like, none of the parents do because they're soggy and soft and depressed and been miserably scorned by the world. Anyways, they're like little 4-year-olds. I've had memorized the whole chapter of James come up to me and tell me the whole first chapter of James. And you just sit there and you're like, dang. And then you have 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds tell you the entire book of James. And you're like, what happened to us? I memorized stupid Mason presidents instead. I'm like, dadgummit. Why the heck did I have to memorize all these Luciferians the whole my life? And you're like, oh, yeah, because the great whore reigns from Rome, Italy, and all the rest of it. Anyways, I got a little sidetracked there. But anytime I think about death, every time I think about death, I think about this entire system that it says, we're here to heal you. You know, and it's like every time I see the fruit of that industry, I've seen such powerful miracles and testimonies in my life and the lives of people around me. And I'm like, we don't need that system. Like the Father gave us the cure. It's right outside our doors, like literally right outside our doors. You can ask him for healing and he can give it to you. I'd love for you to tell people a little bit more about your incredible story coming back from that place of pain. Whichever you don't want to.
We'll get into that after we take a quick little break. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and play a commercial and then we'll get right into it. So don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back. Katie's over here begging for my attention. She's not used to having me at home at this time. But the thing is that I keep them on a pretty strict schedule about like eating and stuff. And so she's over here begging me for food. And I'm like, no, it's not dinner time.
Who knows? Master manipulators, every cat I've ever met.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You know, I found out the other day that the reason that they meow in such a high pitch is because it emulates the cry of babies.
They know it'll get our attention.
Yeah.
Master manipulators,
so
man.
Crafty. Like
sounds shrewdish. Sounds devilish.
No. Cats are pretty great for the
I like it. We had 4 cats. My wife had 4 cats when I met her. And we moved into the RV full time with 4 cats and a baby. It was ridiculous. But she had 3 incredible cats. They would like literally come when you called them, and they would if you were ever crying, they would come and lay on you and just purr incessantly. They were really awesome cats. One of them was one of those stereotypical cats that would slash your eyeballs out if you gave them a chance. You know?
Yeah, I'd be like that. No, but I've noticed with cats, it's kind of more of like they're essentially in a way like dogs, but with just more free will, in a sense. It's because of, I mean, the way I raise the cats, I give them a lot of affection, but I'm also very stern with them, and so it's kind of like I've noticed the difference between the cats that I didn't really do that to, and then the cats, that I've been like unyielding, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And they're a lot more affectionate than the ones that have kind of just been isolated. So, and I think that just says a lot about like how we grow up in ourselves, so.
The truth.
But yeah. It's fascinating because a lot of people are like, oh, cats are just, selfish little jerks. And it's like, are you sure it's
on who
cat?
raises them? I've seen that, man. I've seen it depends a lot on who raises them. You know, they're very, very different. They can have a little bit of a baseline, but, I've seen some of them. One of my buddies raised a cat exclusively on meat. And it was the coolest. It was the most unbelievable cat I've ever met. It would like jump on your shoulders and just walk around with you everywhere. They just wanted to hang out, just like completely inquisitive and curious and a companion, like a dog, that just hung out, wanted to be around you. Would just, if you were working on something, it was going to be right up by you and just watching you do stuff. It would go off and kill something, come back, eat it. Like, it was unbelievable. He hiked the Appalachian Trail with it, and it would just like perch on his backpack and run alongside him. It was an incredible animal. And then somebody fed it cat food, and it changed it forever. And it became like a totally.
I'm convinced that they do the same thing with the animals as they do with us. Like they put all these other hormones and injections and stuff in the meat, and it's just, it totally alters their brain function and their personalities. Yeah, I totally agree with that, because
there's
cats
a book called Dead Pets Don't Lie that goes all into the health food industry of animals, and they feed animals, dead animals. So like when the veterinarian kills a dog and cats, they're like, we had to put down Fido and shoot all these chemicals in him to stop his heart. They literally sell those dead dogs and cats, all the cancer-ridden, like diseased animals, to meat rendering facilities that sell that to the dog food and cat food manufacturers, and they feed that back to your animals. And you're like, why do they got all these neurological problems? Why is Fido always full of cancer? Like, oh, maybe they're feeding them death continually.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a reality. That's a fantastic book, though.
Wow, I'd have to read that sometime. Yeah, because it makes sense. It's like if you can get, it's essentially how the enemy works. Is like he works to get you confused and like captivated by other things, so that it brings chaos into your life. And then, of course, why not through your animals, right?
Yes.
So,
because then they just destroy they run your life. And then so what do you do with your sick animals? Where do you go? The white robe priest of the veterinarian's offices. And they're like, hey, guess what? We got animal insurance now. Uh-huh, we sure do. They're like, you can go to credit card with us and pay for that $84,000 veterinarian bill. You're like, what happened here? But all that goes back into the late 1800s when they started killing all these bison and killing all these coyotes and wolves. And they started being like, you know what? People started replacing animals like livestock, cattle and stuff. They started replacing them with pets. And they were like, oh, you're going to have to feed them. The Bible, I always tell people all the time, Yeshua tells us, we have a story right from the parables of exactly what to feed your dog. And it's the scraps that fall from the master's table. You feed your cats and your dogs what you eat, the scraps from your table. Unbelievable how much it'll help their health. Total transformation so quickly. Just feed them what you eat. If it's fit for your human consumption, trust me, everything they're feeding your animals is not fit for them. It's not. None of them are. Would you want to be fed the same meal for the next 18 years?
I've considered that, and I'm just like, man, this has gotta suck. Like,
they gotta put antifreeze in it to make them lick it. They're like, oh, yum, it's delicious. It's like, well, why do they put MSG in all of it? Why does the Chick-fil-A sandwich have 40 man-made chemicals in it? You're like, why do they got cars outside of Chick-fil-A continually? They're like, because they're all crack addicts. They're just using the same drugs.
It should be chicken and coconut oil. That's it.
You got the French fries, potato French fries at McDonald's have 28 ingredients. You're like, what the heck? 28 ingredients, dude. By design. It's just like all this stuff, man. You're like, wow, why do I feel so much different? We just had this meetup and people brought food in from their farms and all over the country. And farms, I mean, I say that super loosely. Their backyard gardens and stuff. And it was just so flavorful and rich. And then someone bought raw butter and it literally says, dude, I got to get it. Hold on. This is hilarious.
So anyway, guys, we went off on a bit of a tangent, as you can see. I forgot the question. We're just going to keep rolling. So, don't put it in the chat, all right? We don't want any excuse to go back. We're only moving forward. How are you guys, by the way? Go ahead and, by the way, throw your prayers in the chat.
Ask them now.
Yeah, dude, go ahead and throw your prayers in the chat. We'll catch it later. We're always looking out for you guys. So, but yeah, what's the butter?
Look at this. Look at what's that say? Not fit for human consumption. Raw butter. Look at who it says it's supposed to be for. For intermittent or supplemental feeding only of dogs and cats. Unpasteurized cream and salt. And then it has the crude fat protein breakdown, moisture content, crude fiber, just like what you see on dog food and cat food. They literally have to sell this as dog food and cat food in order for people to have actual ability to buy real butter. This is butter, y'all. Everything you've ever eaten your entire life is not butter. I know it masquerades like butter. It might even look like it. Most of it's dyed that color because that's what butter looks like when it comes from actual cows, real cows, raw cows, happy cows. Specifically in the spring when cows put out the grass of the pasture starts to put out the most nutrient dense. It's like the first lush grass that comes in the spring. Maybe not where you are. In my mind, Isaac, everything's green perpetually in Hawaii. I don't know. But out here on the mainland, people are like, Hawaii's only green always continually. Is it basically like that? He's all smirking.
There's desert parts of the island. So
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where there's green stuff. Is it always green stuff?
For the most part, I would say yes. I mean, especially where we live, we just pour water everywhere. So
out here, it turns brown for a while and then it comes up green. And when the cows eat that, their milk is such a deep yellow. It's such a ridiculously deep yellow that it's like glowing golden bricks of glory. Wow. Anyways, that's when they
the
have
real
their
gold,
calves.
Isn't it?
Yeah, ideally that's when they have their calves and they're all just like. And so the butter from that season is just unbelievable and it's so good and you can taste it. This butter tastes like it's super concentrated flavor of butter, like beyond your wildest imaginations. Like the tiniest little sniggle of it on bread. You're like, oh, that's so good. And so we're all about fresh milling our bread. And so then people brought real animal butter and it was like, oh, so good. And you're just like, dadgummit.
You have to keep it refrigerated?
Do I have to? No.
Yeah. No, it's right? Like
regular
butter.
See,
that's what I thought.
All
it's
of the margarine like raw milk, and all of the death butter. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have to. That's why people turn milk. When you have an excess of milk, you turn it into butter or cheese because you
Yeah.
don't want to have to refrigerate it. And you didn't refrigerate it because they didn't have refrigeration the same way. They had things called like spring houses, which is new to me, which is a chill house where it was like 54 degrees. They had a spring that came out and they built a little house over it and they would store their cheeses in there. And it was like it's a refrigerator. People had stuff like this. It's just not the version of it like we have today. It was like real and alive, and it was like full of all kinds of wonderful, unique bacteria that helped to cultivate these flavors in the cheeses that made them so distinct. And so today they mimic that with all kinds of additives and flavors and chemical dyes in order to simulate that. But it happens if you put stuff in the same place over and over again. Same thing happens when you dry age your meat in like a cellar. When you do that, or in caves, where some of the best meat in the world comes from caves where they dry age it. And in that environment, there's bacteria that dominate it that help to break down that meat and start to break down the toughness to it and gives it a totally unique flavor. Same thing happens with butter and dairy and stuff like that. So anyways, I know it seems like a sidetrack, Isaac, but this is how my mind works.
No, absolutely not. I actually enjoyed that.
We're talking about cats.
No, yeah. And then we were talking about something else. So it's totally fine. But that gave me a note to self. I should probably learn how to churn butter.
Bro, or find somebody else that's doing it already. That's one of my favorite things to do is just find a farm. Somebody's already been doing it. Trust me, it's going to be really difficult and different for you to start out. Find somebody that's doing it and then just go learn the skill for yourself, because there's people that want to pass those skills on and they want to find other people that are interested in it. You know, they have a skill set that for a lot of people is just not interesting to them. So if you go show interest about it, man, they will do so much to just show you, and they will teach you things that you could never learn for your first 20 or 30 years. A lot of these people are generational. They've got a lot of experience the hard way. So I always think that's what we're really passionate about with the LinenRailroad, is trying to get people to go rediscover those ancient skills that we've lost, including butter making, and how much better you feel from eating something that you participated in.
Wow. Yeah, that's part of the that would be perfect for me to learn, because I also plan to raise cattle eventually. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I want to do it. I don't know why. I gathered this fascination for cattle, and I was just like, like I've always had a problem with, or all the other milk and whatever. So I was always like, oh, well, there's got to be another way to drink it, obviously. And then, I was like, I can't go without my beef. So if I'm going to go off grid, I got to know how to raise cattle. So I was like, oh, okay, let's do that. And I've been watching this guy on YouTube called the Hoof GP. And he basically just goes around in, I think, Ireland. And he just like helps people with their cattle and shaves their feet.
Oh, he's like a farrier.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it like totally fascinated me, and I was like, huh, yeah, I'd like to raise cattle. It'd be so much fun. I'm sure it'd be backbreaking work, but hey, nothing's easy. So,
bro, this is a book I would highly recommend, Isaac, that you read before you go down that road. It's called Grass-Fed Cattle, and it's by Julius Rochel. Might have got that wrong. But this book is if you want to go down that road, this goes into like the cow, like the actual physiology of the cow, their structure, why cows were designed to eat grass, not grain, and what causes when they eat grain, they get inflammation in their body. So it's like why people get sick all the time, because they eat sick animals. It's a shocking cycle. If you eat death, you become death. It's a real thing. Like what goes into your body definitely can totally destroy your temple. This is the third temple. There's not some other building that's going to be built over there in Jerusalem. Everyone's like, there's going to be a third temple. And then this guy named Nikolai Carpathia is going to go sit in there and slaughter a pig. And they read too many Jerry B. Jenkins and Tim LaHaye novels. And they're like, I know that. That's what the pre-tribulation rapture is going to go down like that. And then he's going to come back from the dead. And everyone's going to know that that's the Antichrist. And I'm like, gosh dang it, y'all. The third temple is you. Like, it's in you, man. Like, the dragon wants to set himself up. There's a beast that wants to transmute himself and shove himself inside you and hook you up to the beast system of AI and all of this artificial construct of transhumanism, y'all. You are the temple of Elohim. Like, the kingdom of heaven is supposed to be within you. You're not supposed to have any other God ruling and reigning in your heart. No Azazel in your heart. No Gadriel, and no amount of metadata inside you. You should not be yoked to the meta and the X and all this other stuff and putting it inside your temple. Anyways, cows make a difference. I loved this book, Isaac, and it gave me a totally new perspective on just their feet. This page, I read this on an airplane and was like, what the heck? I've never even thought about why split hoofs. Like our great creator has this guideline for what is clean and what is not clean. Yeah. And like split hoofs and choose the cud. You're like, why? Just physically the hoof being split. A grazing animal's foot in action, it says. The toes twist and flex, slicing up dead plant material and pushing it into contact with the moist soil later. The footprint behind shows water being absorbed by the fractured soil. Their hooves are designed like scissors, and they literally cut down into the vegetation, and they create tiny little troughs in the vegetation as they walk across. You got a big, heavy animal. And when they do that, when it does rain and moisture comes down, it creates little places for the water to collect and consolidate, and it drives down those cut pieces of grass down into the rhizome, where all these bugs and all these nematodes and all this bacteria and fungi break it down and digest it and use it and convert it into all these things that are nutrients for the roots of the grass to be able to grow and thrive and get better. And all the fertilizer from their butts turns into literal black gold. And it's just this incredible symbiotic relationship that can happen when cows are on grass. But it doesn't work when you feed them grain. You're like, cows just poop out diarrhea, sadness, and sorrows and despair, just like we do. You're like, why are people's guts so wrecked? And you're like, probably because you ate a bunch of super depressed, miserably unhealthy animals. Anyways, this goes into all kinds of different factors about them, how to evaluate them, how to take care of their health, how to build fencing, how to build wells and water systems. And
there it is.
I was all into this because I became a farm manager down on a 50-acre farm down in Texas, and it just totally invigorated me to this because, like you, I wanted to do this, and we were at the time working on getting something called Dexter cows, which are like kind of like small cows, extremely delicious, like high quality beef, similar to like Wagyu or some of these other varieties of calf. And they produce a really rich milk, but not a lot of it. And so I got launched down into this whole world of these high-end cattle ranchers and raisers, and a lot of them are in Missouri and the Ozarks. And a guy named Greg Judy was interconnected with some of them, and it launched me into this whole other world of cattle stuff. But I never actually ended up not getting them because they're very, very expensive. And our fencing took months. We were literally like 6 months in and still working on 4 months in, and we were still working on fencing. And you realize if you don't do fencing and water right, why bother? So I learned instead you just plant fences. Don't build them. Plant them. They last longer. Trees always win over fences. Always.
Oh, there you go.
Plant them. They're called hedges. Over in Europe, like that guy you're watching those videos, you'll see they have hedges around where it just looks like walls of impenetrable masses. That's because people figured out that trees are always better than cast iron fencing posts that are going to rust and going to rot and going to fall over and bend over, and barbed wire. Dude, it's insane. People used to plant something called Osage Edge. I don't have any Osage Orange or hedge apple out here in the Americas. They planted like 80 million of them to create fencing because they were destroying everything. And it was literally, you could have it bowl proof in 3 years, a fence. You could plant it, and it has these thorny hardwood, and so they would cut it and bend it over as it was growing, and then it would send up all these little shoots, and then the next year they would cut those and bend those over and weave them together into this literal like fence, like a barbed wire fence. And as it grew, it just got stronger and stronger and stronger until within a couple of years they'd call it bull strong, pig tough, and one other, I can't remember the other one. Anyways, it could stop all the animals, every animal that you would domesticate, any kind of them. It could completely stop it. And it literally only got stronger over time, and you could plant it in a desert or a swamp, anywhere. The Osage Orange, the hedge apple, my favorite tree in the world. I think it's right here. Check this out. That's its wood. It's goldenrod of Shittim wood. This is the literal golden rods that they use in the Ark of the Covenant. I'm telling you. Wow. It's not acacia wood. Dadgummit. They're always lying to you. Translators, lying pen of the scribes. There's 800 varieties of acacia. None of them look like this. That's the color of that tree. It's beautiful and bodacious. I love it. And it's as strong. It's the best wood on the earth for bow and arrows. It is literally like Jacob's bow.
Just guess what, guys? We just rolled right back to it. Shay in the chat, he asked earlier, he was like, oh, did he switch out his guns for bows and arrows and knives? They're like, yes, he did.
Good question. Not all the guns. I'll just be honest. People don't generally ask me that question entirely. I didn't get rid of all my guns. I got rid of my like battle rifle because it became an idol in my heart. I set it up as an idol in my heart and was like, someday when all of calamity strikes me, I will turn to my Tavor battle rifle with its ACOG scope, and I will slay nations. It became an idol in my heart, Isaac. Yeah, I kept putting it on me. I needed to sell it. We literally sold it and started the LinenRailroad with it and started buying grain and mills and clothing and sending natural fiber clothing and sending it to people over. Literally, he gave us a ministry instead. It's much better. So there's all kinds of things that happen when you lay down your idols. And some of you, your guns are your idols. Just straight up. You're like, that's like your God you worship in your entire time. You sacrifice your time, your energy, your emotions, your focus, your everything to that. And then you don't ever use it. like ever. They're like, I can't afford to shoot the guns, so I don't, and I never train with them. And I'm like, I read the Bible. It says sell your cloak and buy a sword. Like, what if you literally just buy a sword, buy a sword, buy a great sword, buy a sword. Super awesome, very biblical. But yeah, I'm not opposed to guns, and I do have bow and arrows now, and I'm trying to make my own with that Osage orange wood, indeed. And I broke my first one trying it out. That was good lesson. Got to try.
Yeah.
But yeah, great question. Do you have other questions in the chat?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I know they were asking a lot of questions earlier, and I wasn't trying to ignore it, guys. I knew they would eventually be answered. So, um, I don't see anything. I think that was the only question that really popped out on me. So, yeah.
As you've been reading along, Isaac, were there any other questions that you had as you were going through my book?
Um, Actually, yes. Uh, I had a nice, amazing. Uh, I am really enjoying like how you mentioned like going through trauma and stuff. It kind of tends to like cause you to or like moving around a lot. It tends to cause you to not really have like lost lasting or important relationships. So, for the most part, I've had friends and I've never really been close. And I've got my parents, but I've never really really opened up to them. And there, of course, there's reasons for that. But
Yeah.
with my fiance, it's absolutely different. And so,
You're
like,
letting her
I
in.
am 100% raw most of the time. And even when I like try to or even want to hide something, I end up just saying it anyway. Because in my head, I'm like, there's really no point unless it's like like a happy surprise or something like that. So we had an amazing talk this weekend, and it was of course about Yeshua, and it kind of like I saw a notification on my phone for your show, and then it posed a question for me because in a lot of other people's relationships that what we went through may have been considered a fight in some people's eyes, but the reality was that it wasn't at all. We were just having a discussion about different points of views. And because we desire so much to see each other's point of view, like, we get very, passionate about what we're talking about. And so, of course, it all leads back to him and what he's trying to teach us, because praise him for always being involved. But the question that got brought up was, what was one of the biggest challenges you faced after you and your wife got married? And it ties into the whole book thing. So
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, it's all about perspective.
Mhm. Yeah.
She has first year of marriage we used to tell people all the time was the hardest. And then you get some more miles under your belt, some more years under your
Yeah.
belt, and you're like, yeah. At the time it was the hardest thing ever, going from just a very selfish person. Your first year of
Mm.
marriage, you realize how selfish you are. And because you've always just been you in a sense. And maybe
Yeah.
for not not everyone gets married quite so young, and so a lot of times you've had enough time to start to experience autonomy on your own and
Mm.
independence, and and flexing in that independence, kind of embracing it, and you're like finally free
Yeah.
from your parents, and you're like, I get to do what I want. And along that way you generally become very selfish, especially if you turn worldly at all, or you start to just get suckered into the
Yeah.
ways of
It
depravity.
happens.
It's a self-seeking culture. It's just
Yeah.
perpetually offering itself day and night to us. At every turn, there is only ever worldly influences waiting to ambush us. And our first year of marriage, that was the hardest thing, was going through that perspective of like, I can't just be my own decision maker. Like, I need to include my wife in these decisions now, and she needs to include me. And how do we
Yeah.
navigate communications? Everything was communications. And how do we learn how to communicate? Like, how to fight
Mhm.
fair, and how to not, like, at the time I was taking marriage counseling courses at CU Boulder, and they talked about these four horsemen of the apocalypse that were great indicators for a marriage that was going to end in divorce. This guy literally was like trying to be able to, within like 10 minutes, decide with like a higher than 80% accuracy, was this couple going to get divorced. And
Wow.
so they started like analyzing. They would ask couples questions that caused them fighting, to be like, what's a hot button topic for you guys to talk about? And to be like, whatever. If it was sex, if it was marriage, if it was, finances or whatever it may be, or time spent with each other, how to raise the
Yeah.
children or whatever it might be, or hobbies. And they would
Uh-huh.
talk about that, and then they would film them. And like, then one of the biggest indicators of that, like, was something called eye rolling, where it's like, oh, this like blatant disrespect was one of the biggest indicators that like things were not going to go well. And like, seriously. And it's over. It's more, it's like three quarters of marriages that are going to end in divorce within 7 years. And so it's like those first 7 years are really it. It's like,
Yeah.
you got to get through those first 7 years more than anything else, and you're more likely than not going to make it. And so those were like, all that stuff was on my mind all the time in the beginning. And so I had this like counselor perspective all the time when we were fighting, and be like, honey, I take classes on this. Like, I know how to fight well. And then you just realize you're just a jerk a lot of times. Not as much then.
Yeah.
I got meaner later on. I got more of a jerk later on in marriage once children showed up, and I got pissed.
That
most
one
of the
hit me
time.
on the nail the other day, and I was just like, I'm kind of just excuse my language, a dick head, like, like I really am, like, yeah.
Yeah. That's an aspect of learning marriage, how to be selfish. Like, there's a reason it says in the scriptures, he's like, husbands, love your wives, like, love them. We read a book that was called Love and Respect, which was a very helpful communication tool that dealt with
We're going through it ourselves.
why
So
men need to feel. I don't know about the theology in there, I haven't read it in a long time, but I knew at the time the communication side of it was critical. And like, why men want to feel respected, and why women want to feel loved, and why those two commandments are given to us. Like, don't break those commandments, because when you don't love your wife, she's not going to respect you. And when when she doesn't respect you, you're not going to love her. And it's an unbelievable hurricane that just starts to just build pressure in a tremendous way. And
calls
so
it the crazy cycle.
the crazy cycle. Yeah, you're right in the middle of that book, dude. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. You're reading the right book. That was one of the best ones. That was one of the most helpful tools. The 5 love languages was another beneficial one for us at that time early on in our marriage, but none of that could have prepared us, honestly, for what we went through. None of it really could have. Like, as things turned and I began to talk about more and more and began to trust her, I just say trust her. Like you just said, there's so much you haven't told your parents. And there's stuff you're telling your fiance that you haven't told the people that have been with you. Like, your mom's been with you for a long time, decades. And there's mountains of stuff that you've never shared with her. And that's understandable. It's not wrong. It's just reality. But there's going to be things that you're going to start sharing with your fiance as she becomes your wife, that once they leave your lips, like, there's no going back. And those are heavy. There's no going back. But the more you withhold from her, the less she ever has of you, and the less you'll ever have of her. Because you're gonna lead your family, you're gonna lead your home in vulnerability, and this is why I'm. That whole book was like, whether or not do I tell my wife, like whether or not I tell her this stuff, and it's still there's still stuff I haven't told her. There's still, I could sit and talk to I long for the day where I can sit with my wife and just talk to her, like, for a good while. It's super hard having children. Sometimes I'm deeply embittered towards them. I'll be real honest with you. Sometimes I absolutely loathe raising children. I despise it. I hate it. People are like, don't say that stuff. I'm like, screw you. You don't know what it's like.
Hey guys, this is the reality, okay?
I have twin babies. Like, I have twin babies. Let's just say this. I have twin babies. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Then I read Jacob, and like Isaac, and you're like, oh, these babies. Sometimes they were twin babies, and sometimes those babies literally were tearing their mother apart in the womb. They were fighting so much. Like, I have older I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and just when they fight, you just want to throw your head through a wall. You're like, just stop fighting, just stop fighting, stop screaming at each other. And you're like, what are you screaming? I'm like, because I can't. Yeah. You're like, oh my gosh, all those things you never wanted to be like. Like, you never wanted to say. There's all these parenting phrases you heard all your life growing up, and then you use them. And you're like, dang right I do. You're like, because I'm tired and I'm exhausted. I'm trying to do so many other things. Like, I have 20-hour days consistently. Most of my days are 20 hours, like 22 hours sometimes. And I'm like, I get done on here at like 2 a.m. and I go lay down, and like literally it's World War III sometimes in there. It's just throwing down. I got one baby that wakes up the other baby, that wakes up me, that wakes up Chelsea, that wakes up my daughters, and wakes up everybody inside me that just wants to throw everything out the wall. Like, it is quite a cycle. It is very difficult to raise children. And I was very miserable and angry because I went from having my wife to just like, once I finally opened up to Chelsea, it was like I had the best friend ever. That's who your wife should be. Your spouse should be your best friend. You should not need a therapist.
Absolutely agree.
You should not need a therapist. Some of you do. I get it. But a therapist is just a paid friend. That's what they are. It's all they are. They just know a lot more about being a friend than most of you know about being a friend, which is super sad and should be convicting to all of you because you don't know how to love your neighbor. And
Mm.
like most people literally just don't know how to love their neighbors. They don't know how to shut up and listen to somebody else, and they just want to talk all the time. And it's brutal. Some people need to talk for days and months and years because what they've kept inside them deserves a voice, and they've just been
Yep.
around people that silenced them their entire
To
life. That's why.
silence them all. Yep.
Yeah. And so like having a spouse, like I'm excited for you because I think like for you, it's going to unlock peace. It's going to unlock security. It's going to unlock stability that
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, is that everything that I have experienced, because I have my best friend Yahweh, Yeshua, like that's how that's literally how I talk to him all the time. And so it's just like, it's transitioning to her, and it's like I never really expected it to happen, but then it's kind of just like, yeah, like how you said, some people need a therapist. The reality is in my life, Yeshua is my therapist. Like I'm talking to him all the time, and I'm just like, I don't know. I'm very real with him, and it's almost scary sometimes because it's like I'll literally say it to his face, like, I don't want to do that. So it just transitions. So
that's beautiful.
then the abundance of right flows to everybody else. So
Man, that's beautiful that you said that he's your best friend. You
yeah,
know, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing, and you're going to be blessed exceedingly to have a wife come alongside you in that. It's a helpmate. She's your armor bearer in a powerful way. You become a lot. You can take down 10,000 enemies in a fight, man. It's a big deal. It's a major force multiplier. You go from 1,000 people you could fight simultaneously to 10,000. It's not a joke, And
yeah,
I've seen like there's great blessings in having children, and all my life though I've just been kind of cursed with this idea that it's only better when you're older. Like being a child is the most dangerous time ever. It's the most miserable time ever, and it's a horrible time. It's like you're just cursed from birth. So
yeah,
I have a very broken lens for babies and children and infants, and until they're like capable of capable, and it's really hard. Child rearing is incredibly hard. It's an absolute death of myself, and it's hard. Had a hard day. Had a hard day. We worked for 10 days to get ready for that meetup, and that's not to mention all the other stuff we do for ministry,
yeah,
and it's like all at the same time. There's a 24-hour nonstop demand of two babies simultaneously, and screaming babies is literally what shattered my mind. Shattered my mind. It split me into 1,000 pieces. It's just torment and anguish, that horrible sound of babies crying. It's still painful every single time. I still loathe it. It still hurts me every single time they cry. It still hurts. And so I hear it constantly, and I'm just in pain most of the time. So before, like Chelsea, like I talk about in the book, she used to literally breastfeed Naomi like continually to keep her from screaming around me. She used to literally give up herself constantly to take care of Naomi, to keep her from crying all the time, because I would literally just curl up in a ball and start crying uncontrollably under the table, just run away, plug my ears and run away and just cry somewhere, like
yeah,
terror, like a terror. Like when some people see snakes, they're like, ah! Like
yeah,
that's how I feel like when babies are crying. And so that didn't just go away. And I believe me, deliverance and prayer and fasting and seeking deliverance and every form of inutterable cries throughout my life, I have cried for healing from that area, but it still burns. It still hurts. And I'm still sad every time. And it's really been a death of myself to raise my family. It's been horribly hard. And yet, as my children got older, like as Naomi is 7, she's an incredible help. She is so incredibly capable and an incredible blessing to my family. And she is like having, she's like having a teenager. She's 7 years old, but she's more capable than most 20-year-olds I know. She's amazing. And Jubilee is too. She's wonderful and cheerful and pleasant, but these babies are really tough. And my wife keeps saying it. She's like, yeah, I gave you these to help you heal. And I'm like, she says that, but I feel like I'm tortured still by children. And
mm,
I love them, and they are incredibly painful. And that's the reality. Children are wonderful. I'm sure your mom, dude, you were a tough child to raise.
oh,
Like,
I definitely was.
I read your
Yeah.
mom's book, dude. You were brutal. You were
Hmm.
brutal. You're a very different person today than then, but you were
Yeah.
brutal to raise,
Hmm.
and what a story of long suffering Like dude, I don't get it. I don't know how people do that. I don't know how parents have that much love. I don't relate to that kind of love. I've never had that kind of love. I don't know that I have the capacity to love people the way that I see my wife has this unbelievable love for my children. Like such a
Mhm.
deep love, like this maternal love, you know? Like just like she literally gave up her life for them. She's given up her body for them 4 times, you know? She's like she died for them. Literally. She dies for them all the time. She dies right now. She's laying down her life for them. And I
Mhm.
just it's unbelievable the love mothers have for their children. And your mother chose you. She ends the book, dude. You haven't read it, but I'm gonna read you a portion of it. She ends it.
Oh, great.
You should, dude. You should read this book. Your mom,
Yeah, I probably
dude, your
should.
mom lived it. Just saying, man. You owe it to her to read her. If ever somebody writes a book that you know, gosh dang it, read their book. For real, Isaac. You should read your mom's book. Like, it's not a joke. She shared her testimony. This is the stuff that
Mm.
like lives on forever. And she said, this is literally it. This book, this is the last words of it. This book is dedicated to my son, Isaac Daniel George, who I chose to be my son 23 years ago.
Mm.
Yahuwah's ways are much higher than ours. And not only does he receive all the glory for Isaac's miracle, but he received all our praise for helping us grow closer as a family through this entire season of both spiritual and physical healing. Wherefore, if any man be in Yeshua, he is a new creation. The old is passed away. Behold, all things are become new. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Like she ends it with that and those pictures of you paralyzed in that bed, people playing ukuleles and trying to help give you hope when you're
Yeah.
gone. You know, there's a picture of your spine all shattered and jacked up. And then there's
Yep.
you dancing, playing that ukulele, man, playing over the rainbow for those people that stood there while you were completely incapacitated and then you stood in front of them as a living witness. Your
Yep.
story is incredible, honestly, man. And it's powerful and it's profound. And it's one you're gonna have to learn to navigate. As you have children, you will have to deal with a lot of stuff you never dealt with ever. You've never touched, you never even knew was there. It's hiding behind a wall of trauma that is so deep and so profound you couldn't touch it with 10,000-foot pole. And if the
Yeah.
father opens your wife's womb, man, and you get children of your own, it's because the father wants you to deal with those things. You know, there's things I would have never addressed that happened because my wife got pregnant. All this came from that. You know, at the end of the day, there's a lot that I'm dealing with now that wouldn't have been here if I didn't have twins and constant babies that I could run away from. You know, there's things I'm having to face my nightmare every single day I raise children. Like I have to face it. I have to face it. And I have to choose to love them. I have to choose as an act of my will to forgive these people that tortured me with this. They set me up for such failure. Like you were set up for such failure and destruction. People they literally branded you as unadoptable. They branded you as like cursed, you know, and they set you up for failure. And here you are, literally a new creation. And
Yep.
you're literally a living witness to that. And
That's
every day
why
we choose to
I
do that. It's
truly
great.
believe after Yeshua died, he broke the curse off of everything, including the curse that was placed on, between the serpent and the man. I mean, if you walk in Yeshua, yeah, he forgives it all, right? So,
He breaks that cycle.
yep,
There's He's the one
nothing
who
left.
redeemed. Genesis 50:21, I think it is. Everything that they entitled Joseph when he said to his brothers, the guys who trafficked him and sold him into human slavery and all the rest of it,
Mm.
they were all scared after Jacob died. They're like, oh no, now he's gonna enact his revenge, you know? And he's like, everything that you all intended for evil, Yahuwah intended for good and the saving of many lives. That's what I believe, man. Like you said, that word that came to you like a week before your accident, it's like he's going to use this for great good and for the saving of many lives. You know, the enemy, I think, intended your neck to snap and take you out. And Father allowed it. And yet he used it for great testimonies. You know, you got to travel around and share your testimony all over the place. You know, you're a living witness against the kingdom of corruption that the truth wins. And I'm
Hmm.
so excited that you have a conviction to defend that faith, man, to defend it and take that simple faith with you wherever you go. People need to hear it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I need to hear it a lot. So, but question. The I got a question from Jamoli. She said, he or she says, does Nathan's wife ever feel like she has been duped? This pertains to the question or the topic you had earlier about, the things that had been revealed to you, and then because he changed so much and then became a different person.
I don't know. I think that's better for you to maybe ask her. I don't know that you.
I thought the same thing. I
She
had the
that'd be a
I
great
thought about
question to
it
ask
too, but
her.
I was like,
I don't know if she's never. I don't know that she's ever said the word duped.
mm,
I'm just trying to think of the way. I think I talk about her response to everything. It
mhm.
wasn't malicious in the same way, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Um, I wasn't trying to hide who I was from her in order to hurt her or cause her harm or to like get her to be mine. You know,
Yeah.
I was so deeply fractured and like the two main tenets of myself. Okay, the better way to understand this, y'all, is you have two hemispheres in your brain. You have a left hemisphere. It's literally like half of a brain, and you have a right
Yep.
hemisphere of your brain. The left hemisphere of your brain controls the right side of your body. The
Yep.
right hemisphere of your brain controls the left side of your body. There is a chunk of neurons that's like a cable that goes between the two, that communicates between the two. But one side of your brain controls your speech. The other side controls like visual inputs in a different way. So, like, if you cut the cord between those two, and this is what they've done all kinds of places and all kinds of times. You all right? Could I ask you a question?
Hey,
Somebody
she
had a
came in
question.
to
Could I ask
answer
you a
it.
question?
Let's
Someone just
go.
asked a question for you. Could I ask you a question? Would you answer a question real quick? She's got to go back to bed. Nope, she's all speaking in on me. She's waving. She can't. She's got to go back to the twins. But if you cut that cable between the two hemispheres of the brain, you can
Yeah.
literally you can hand somebody like this arrowhead in their left hand, and they can't communicate what they have. That this side of their brain cannot, the right side of their brain cannot speak the word for what it is. They could
Yeah.
draw it, and then but they couldn't tell you what it was. They physically can't tell you what it is. And this is what will happen is this is split brain programming. This is literally what they do is they create two distinct personalities. They're called a day walker and a night walker, and they are
Yep.
as distinct as if you cut that center of the brain off, so that the right side literally, and this is what they use, the side that has no speech, that has no ability to communicate, that becomes like the satanic side. That becomes like the dark side, the night walker side of you.
Yeah.
So you literally can't articulate what has gone on in your life. You can't express it. You can't communicate it. You have no way to physically talk about it. And so this is why it comes out often through artistic expression. The way I was able to access a lot of like this other side of myself was through nostalgia, like sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell would
Yes.
trigger these memories, these floodgates of memories that would
Yeah.
bring it over to the other side of my mind, of my brain, that I could communicate with
Yep.
effectively. And so like journaling and writing were extremely effective tools because it was like my brain was able to communicate in a capacity that was hardwired, like physically split off between the two sides of me. And so when I was able to finally feel like I got out of what's called like the hierarchy of needs. I wasn't always trapped with finding food, clothing, water, and shelter all the time. Like I was in a perpetual state of survival for so long in my life that I never had a conscious thought of being able to sit down and express and process all these emotions out. I was just trying to literally get through the next day, the next meal, the next hour, the next rent that was due, the next everything. I was just always trying to
Yeah.
find a way, just feed myself, like just try to find a way to feed myself, digging into dumpsters. And like I ate out of trash cans for so long. Even when Chelsea met me, I was literally living on a couch and eating out of trash cans. Like when she met me, and she was like living in a high rise, like a beautiful, super nice apartment area, and had a nice, successful job. And I was like, I eat trash, like we came from very different worlds, but I
Yeah.
played everything awesome as kind of a joke, as kind of like funny and haha funny. And I was sober at the time too. Like when she met me, I wasn't drinking. And so like none of those safeguards came down, but like, that's definitely some of those things when you start using mind altering substances, that stuff starts coming down really heavy. And so, she took a vow within our first year, maybe not even a vow. She just basically promised the father at the time not to drink alcohol anymore, like 6 months into our marriage, because we realized every time we did something, all of our friends did it. And we were like kind of influencers of the group around us. And if we were into alcohol, everybody was into alcohol. If like we wanted to hang out and play board games and do something like that, everybody would drink if we drank. And but if none of us drank, none of them did. And so she stopped drinking like 6 months into our marriage. And that was really, really beneficial for her. And she's been sober from alcohol ever since. And I wavered back and forth on that over the years until I took a Nazarite vow. Numbers chapter 6 talks about a cure for addictions. is why
Yeah.
it literally says, you know, if any man wants to set themselves apart or woman wants to set themselves apart from to Yahuwah, you want to be more set apart to him. He's like, let the hair of your head grow loosely. Don't let a razor come upon your head. Don't abstain from all things related to death. Don't go to funerals, not even for your mom, your dad, your uncles, nobody. You don't go to funerals. You don't go touch dead bodies. If you do, you got to shave your head and start over if you want to, but your vow is desecrated. And don't drink anything that comes from the fruit of the vine. Don't drink strong drink. Don't use mind altering substances. Like, don't pervert your mind with this stuff that changes your condition. And you can do it for a season of time. You can do it for a certain amount of times, or you can do it for the entirety of your life. But that vow is literally what helped to cure me finally from my need to run to all kinds of things, especially alcohol, to try to just alter my state of consciousness. All my life, I've been using chemical substances over the counter mostly to maneuver my way, to hack my way, to shut down different parts of my brain, to literally, that's why, like, at night I used to take a lot of Tylenol PM, and it totally damaged and destroyed my kidneys in a lot of ways and liver. And I would just take Benadryl, and I would take stuff to just try to knock myself out because I didn't want to dream. Because when I dreamed, that side of me would bring all this stuff out, all this like horrible rituals and abuse and like these monsters that were like eating me and eating children and my family members, like consuming and raping me and all this stuff. And like, I didn't want to see that, you know, I didn't want to see that. And so I would drug myself out to try to avoid it. So then during times of sobriety, that other side of me would come out, but couldn't come out. And so it just bled over. And that's what a lot of, I think, the beginning years of my marriage, my wife and I were experiencing, was just bleed over between those two sides of me, because I was feeling safe. I had an address, like I was living somewhere permanently, like people could find me if they wanted to. And I felt on one side very unsafe, and on the other side I felt very safe that I could start talking to this woman, because the more I shared with her about who I was and what I was actually into, like what I was passionate about, the more she like showed interest in me, like that she continued to show interest in me, even though that's not who she signed up for. She said that all the time, like she didn't sign up for this. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't a bitter way of saying it, but she definitely didn't sign up for this class. And
I say that I say that a lot too. I'll be like, if something comes across, what am I expected to do? I signed up for it. Like choosing you means all of you, not just parts that I enjoy or parts that I want to know, and that includes the things that I don't want to know. So yeah, I hear you.
She said that when I started sharing all this with her, the literal words out of her mouth was, "I love you and I love every part of you." Wow. And I was like, it was like all of me heard that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody had ever loved me like that. You know, lots
Probably
of people like aspects of me. Very few people like all of me. All love all of me. You know, I've experienced a lot of people. I've tested a lot of people's unconditional love. Let me just say it that way. There's a lot of people that like to play words, that they like to give you lip service and say, "I love you." And you're like, we'll see.
We'll see.
You know, we'll see.
The only one who can perfectly love us is Yahweh.
Yeah. So. And it sucks because he doesn't put on skin suits all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not some guy who's like the avatar gods that drop into people's body all the time and all. It's not the same thing. You know, he works powerfully through his Holy Spirit, but it's not the same as having Yeshua here in the flesh. You know, no. I think it's very hard. It's very hard because he works through his spirit to move and speak through people and love on people through that, and the spirit of truth and the spirit of love. And you get to experience that, but it's not the same as having him here, you know. Yeah. But he said it was better for him to go, that he would send a helper, you know. And so I've seen that and I've experienced that, but at the same time, it's hard. It's hard. Raising families is really difficult to do. It's really difficult to do, and you have to be united. You have to be committed to each other. And my wife and I we had a covenant together, and it changed us forever. And she and we've tested each other in that. And she is such a joyful, wonderful, pleasant woman. She is an incredible source of love and life for me and for my children. And she sacrifices herself continually in order to have that. I'm not an easy person to love. I'm not an easy person to live with. I'm not always joyful and abundantly filled with happiness. There's some nights where like I am filled with deep sorrow. Like today is a day I just want to cry. And instead I've got to raise this family and unload a U-Haul and do all these adult responsibilities that I don't want to do. I don't want to have to take care of my children today. Like this is a day I just want to go climb into a ditch and cry. You know, this is a day where I watch a lot of people I love die. And it sucks. Like it's as vivid as yesterday. You know, I can still taste their filthy, disgusting, horrible abominations that happen. I can smell the smell of burnt flesh in my nose. Like it doesn't just go away. You know, those like remembering is good and horrible. You know, there's a reason people choose to forget. There's a reason people never talk about it ever again. And I totally respect people that never want to talk about it. I understand, you know,
Yeah.
and it's hard. It's really hard. You have been through hell in serious and profound ways, Isaac, in ways that you don't have to tell anybody ever. You can always just tell your best friend Yeshua all the rest of your life if you want. But I'll tell you, talk to your wife as much as you can, as long as you can, while you still have children, because once they show up, man, it changes. It changes. Like I lost my best friend in for a long time when we were just raising babies. You lose each other in some sense, and you have to learn how to navigate communication with each other, and it takes a while to get used to that. It takes a while to get used to still finding ways to still be with each other. But like, we raise our children 24/7, her and I both. We don't let other people raise our children ever for any reason. You know, we never ship them off and do that. And so we have to find ways to spend time together. And it's been a really big challenge having these twins. And it's been really hard. It's been really good in some ways, but it's been mostly really hard. She has a different perspective on it. People can ask her. She's a lot more hopeful about life. she's a lot less full of rage at times. You know what I mean? She's a good woman. Choose wisely.
Okay, Nathan. We know that the people that smile the most usually have the most pain. So
Yeah, like, I laugh all the time and I'm so miserable.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. I can understand why it's revealing. I've contemplated that aspect a lot too. Like, just, I know that just with like remembering the things that I grew up in, and then knowing that not only that those will play a role in how I parent my children, but that will also bring to light some of the things that may have not been healthy, or are particularly Yahweh leading in my life too. And I was just like, I sat with my fiance and I was like, both of our ways of parenting are going to be very vital and important. Like the way that we see parenting and in our two different aspects already, it's just like we're either it's going to make it to the point where like it's almost like they get the best of both worlds in a way, so
they do. My wife is like a giant counterbalance of love and peace, and like she's such a beautiful mother. She's so beautiful. She's thrived since being a mom. She was very discontent in the career field, in the healthcare industry, and being an RN nurse, and just watching the system of healthcare just destroy people's lives. She has thrived becoming a mother. She has thrived. She's a wonderful wife. She's beyond anything I could ever hope for in a woman. Truly, she is more than enough for me, more than I could ever have imagined. This is like he talks about, like, people are like, what's heaven like? It's like more than we could ever hope or imagine. You can't even imagine it. Can't even imagine. I could have never have imagined what my life would be like today. We say that a lot right now, especially with the twins. They're like, this is ridiculous. It's a movie, man. Our life is like a blockbuster movie. It's ridiculous. It's hilarious too. It's funny sometimes, and there's a lot of just ridiculous. Like, there's so much poop explosions today, dude. Ridiculous outfit changes. There's just so much poop explosions. Just that. That's just one baby.
And then trying to clean the linen.
Bro, you're trying to have, yeah, bro, yeah. You're going to test the linen stain resistance with that, man. It's ridiculous. You know how much we get pooped on and crap. Like this shirt, dude, just like, my shirt's covered in blood stains and all kinds of stains, dude. All kinds of stains.
That's your battle scars.
That's dad life. That's dad life. Dad life's as colorful and stinky. It's good. It's really good.
I'm gonna get so nauseous.
You bet, dude. If you don't like the smell of poop, you better get used to it, son. You better get used to it. What's the one that
Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. I smelled poop just the other day. All right. So, working security, you run into some stuff that you were not expecting. So
dang, people pooping on themselves and puking on themselves.
Oh yeah.
Is that what you're doing right now?
Oh yeah. So I'm not in like the field anymore. So they just had the new rail that just it's like the train rail that just opened recently, and they basically plucked me out and voluntold me to go work there. So I'm over there now, just in this little AC room, just chilling and playing with cameras and watching people and telling my security guards, go here, go there, so
Very different than what you're doing before.
I was on the road. I guess you could call it like a rover. So I went to a bunch of different locations and then, checked it out. If everything was cool, I'd go to the next one. So, and that's part of the reason why I switched over there to this position too, because, working during the graveyard shift I had started to notice that it's not ideal for having a relationship.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like I enjoyed that time. I really did, like, because it taught me a lot about myself, and I had a lot of time to just spend with Yahweh, and like, in between checks and everything. So I appreciated it so much. But when I started, dating her, I had noticed like she would be staying up to like 3 in the morning talking story with me, and just having conversation. And then I was just like, yeah, this isn't gonna last. Because she's just gonna get pooped, like we're totally wiped out. And I kept telling her, just go to bed, like it's totally fine. And she's such a sweet, loving person. She'd stay up with me, and so I was just like, yeah. So when the opportunity came up, I was like, you're telling me to go work here, but at the same time, I'm like, I stood right in front of all my bosses, and I was like, okay, I will go and work this position, but you cannot give me graveyard for shifts. If you give me graveyard shifts, I will walk out the door. They just looked at me like, what? I was like, I did my time. 5 years graveyard, my seniority has kicked in. Put me on the day shift. So, and they were just like, okay. Yep. So they stuck to it, and I was like, all right, I appreciate it. But yeah.
Awesome. Good changes. Good changes. I'm glad you have her, and I'm excited to see what comes from it. And when that day comes, Isaac, I do hope you will feel more and more comfortable to share your story and share what you have come through and overcome. It says the enemy is defeated by the blood of the Lamb and the words of our testimony, and not living our lives when faced with death. These are our weapons that we got to fight with. And being transparent and honest with her. The more you build that bridge of honesty and vulnerability now early on, as you're building those foundation blocks of your relationship and your marriage, the greater reinforcements that you have in order to weather the storms that are inevitably going to come, because you're going to start carrying some real heavy loads across those bridges of your communications trails. And man, big, heavy burdens are going to come your way inevitably in every relationship. You're going to have trials, you're going to have testings. And it's like, you lay those foundations deep, you dig them deep, and you lay them good, and because of that, you have a sure foundation. And as you guys lay those relational stones on the Messiah and on his truth and his word and that simplicity of the gospel, it is such a profound thing. Like that love, we can never lose sight of his incredible love that he laid down his life for us. Like the most quoted verse I got of all the children yesterday was John 3:16. And like, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And I was just sitting on there, and they're like, it was probably like 5 or 6 children that had that verse, and I was like, it's such a simple, profound one. Others had verses about discipline and obedience and obeying their parents. And I was like, you be the troublemaker.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. They had all these verses on obedience stuff. And I was like, yeah, you cause problems in your house, don't you? And but
sure did.
You sure did. You're like, there's so many verses about that. I like those guys. But we can never lose sight of those simple words. It's like, it's a simple instruction. If you could get anybody to learn any one thing, that's a profound message. That's a profound one. I have a different one. Like on my knife here, it says, guard the commandments of Yahuwah your Elohim, to walk in his ways and revere him. Like that's the foundational one for me, because that was a core tenet of the gospel that I never heard much growing up. That like, you want to be a guardian. You go and you want to be a protector of people. Nobody goes into security. You were a lifeguard as well. It's like you had a desire to protect people. You want to save people. You want to protect lives. I wanted to protect innocence. I wanted to guard innocence, and guarding the commands. It's the first command given to man, is to be an obed and a guardian. Like, we are made to be guardians. That's an apologist. You're supposed to guard the truth. You're trying to defend the truth. You're trying to defend the truth. You want to be a guardian. And that's what we were made for. Men were made to be guardians. We're supposed to guard our covenants. Guard the commandments of Yahuwah your Elohim. Walk in his ways and revere him. He's the only one we're supposed to fear. He's the only one we're supposed to adore. Like, in that absolute totality of fear, it's supposed to be on him. We're supposed not to fear the face of any man. And by doing that, it changes us. I needed that component of the gospel message before I could actually have freedom from the fears of men and the fears of failure and the fears of falling apart and losing Chelsea. I had to trust that if I loved him most, if he was my true best friend, like you said, man, then I can't fear losing her. That's why I kept that information from her for so long, because it was a fear that I would lose her. And you know what? It was worse. The longer I waited to tell her those things, the worse it was. It was better to tell her sooner. I'm glad you're laying those foundations now, and give her every opportunity to leave now. In that sense, give yourself every opportunity to leave now, because marriage is putting a loaded gun to somebody's head and trusting that they're not going to pull the trigger. That's what marriage really is. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. That's what it is. You're 100% giving them every reason to blow your head out. Nobody else can hurt you as bad as your husband or your wife can, ever. I've watched enough people go through divorce, and I've watched all of the carnage. Yahuwah says he hates divorce for a reason, because it's just blowing somebody's brains out. You got all the secrets, all of their worst nights, all of their best moments and their worst moments come crawling out of the closets. And you know what? It's not good. It's horrible. So choose wisely, choose wisely. And I encourage people, if it is not wise, step away. It's like it's like right before you go into the military, before you're all the way in, man, get out. No matter how many papers you've signed, if you haven't shipped out, man, get out. There's a lot of, it's an unholy covenant for a lot of people. And so choose wisely. Don't missionary date. I'll win them over to Christ, I promise. It's like, they'll win you over to the devil more often than not. So
yeah, I'm very thankful that was just like, no, if she wants to date you, she has to follow this. And I was like, okay.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Isaac, for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. If there are any other pressing questions that popped up?
No, not that I've seen. So
well, I appreciate you so much, Isaac. Seriously, your testimony is profound, even though it's written from your mother's perspective on one side of it. You're a living witness of an incredible life. And you know what? When I first jumped on here last time to do that show, you can never know anybody's story by just who they appear to be on a screen. And you are an incredibly powerful man for the kingdom of Yahuwah. And I'm so grateful to see and get to watch the incredible fruitfulness of your life going forward. He snatched you right out of those flames, man. You should be a dead man, unequivocally so. Not just because of that little tiny accident then. You had many other moments where he has brought you back from the dead. And I'm so thankful that you are alive and that you have a great war to wage. And so anytime, any way I can come alongside you and help you to wage that war, I am honestly eager to do so. So
you recognize it because you've been through it too, Nathan. So yep.
Appreciate
He has definitely snatched you as well.
That's great. Would you pray for us before we go, Isaac?
Oh, definitely. Please. Bow your heads, children. Thank you so much, Yahweh, for and Yeshua, Baruch HaKodesh, the one true living King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Thank you for everything that you have continued to orchestrate, everything that you have had your way in, and I pray that whatever you will continue to reveal to us and whatever you have for us, Abba, that you would just step in. We give you all authority, and we are your slaves of righteousness, Father. So you know what you have planned for us. It is good. It is merciful. It is gracious. It is something that will not only lead us closer to you, but lead the people around us closer to you, because you have orchestrated us to be the Ark of the Covenant, and that is who we are. All we are vessels of your glory and your majesty and your wisdom and your understanding, and we can only praise you. So as you continue to lead us and instruct us in your ways with your rod and your staff, may we just surrender to it, and not just in the ways that we want, but in the ways that you have asked of us. So above all these things, my words and everything that is spoken tonight, Father, I pray that your will be done in all of these things. In Yeshua's name, thank you.
Hallelujah. Go keep yourself from idols, like First John ended that book with, man. Keep yourself from idols. Appreciate you so much. All right. Look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Good night.
Aloha.